Well, given everybody stayed up until 11, I understand.
Oh, not me.
I didn't either. Okay.
Oh.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's not that I...
All right.
We get to see them. You get to see it all the time.
Far enough away. You'd be surprised how long
I'll call this meeting to order. Thank you for joining us this morning for the Oregon State Board of Agriculture meeting. Today is Wednesday, December 18th. This is Elin Miller, Chair of the Board. This meeting is now officially called to order. Note that public comment is scheduled today at 11 o'clock. We received one written public comment ahead of today's meeting. If you would like to sign up this morning to provide verbal comments, please make your request using the chat box, including your name and organization, or if you're here in the room, to use the sign-up sheet on the entry table. Comment time will be limited to 3 minutes per person. This meeting is being recorded, and I ask board members and guests to please state your name for the record before you begin your comments. I'd like to begin by asking Department of Agriculture Board Coordinator Carla Belness to review a few housekeeping items for us this morning.
Good morning. Just one brief correction. Today's public comment is scheduled for 10:15 a.m.
Thank you.
And just a reminder to please mute your phones or computer audio during the call to prevent unnecessary background noise. We also request that only board members and presenters turn on your camera while on the call. And if you are joining online, pre-meeting materials are posted on the ODA website at oda.direct/boardagriculture, or information will be posted after the meeting. And just a reminder again that this meeting is being recorded.
Thank you, Carla. Carla, will you please call the roll of members for introductions, and I'll begin. Elin Miller, Umpqua, Farmer.
Chad Allen.
Chad Allen, Dairyman, and Tillamook.
Barbara Boyer.
Barbara Boyer, Chair of the Soil and Water Conservation Commission.
Brian Harper is absent. Ty Kluwer is delayed. Miguel Lopez.
Miguel Lopez, wine grower, White Valley.
Ellie Norris.
Ellie Norris, Farmer, Douglas County.
Eric Oram.
Good morning, Eric Oram, Farmer, Hepner.
Luisa Santamaria is absent. Josh Zielinski.
Josh Zielinski, Farmer, Nurseryman from Salem.
Dean Simonich.
Stacy Simonich, Dean of Oregon State University's College of Agricultural Sciences and Director of the Oregon Agricultural Experiment Station.
And Director Sharpelo Hansen has stepped out of the room for a short time, but is present. Again, sorry, please, just a reminder, if you are online and would sign in using the chat box, that would be great. And we'll go around the room here, starting with Ryan.
Thank you, Carla. Again, I'm sorry, 10:15 is the public comment period. First thing on the agenda, we're excited to... Oh, I'm sorry, introductions. Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes, let's go ahead and do introductions around the room if we could. Let's start at the very... Let's go ahead and start on this side and move this way.
Sure. Hi, Eric Garman, Oregon Department of Agriculture.
Sonny Summers, Department of Ag.
Jonathan Sandoff, Department of Ag.
Casey Brennan, Department of Ag. Lindsay A, Department of Ag.
Isaac Stapleton, Department of Ag.
Chris Bettman, Department of Ag.
Ryan Trolls, Department of Ag. James Lukowski, Coastal Oregon Marine Experiment Station.
All right, good. Now I'm pleased to turn over the agenda to Dean Simonich for her report for us this meeting.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good to be here today. Well, it's been a very, very busy fall for the college. I gave some preliminary numbers on enrollment at our September meeting in Hermiston, and that was before the official census that took place in early October for the university. In September, I said our enrollment in the college was up 2 to 3%. Turns turns out it was up 4.4%. So we have a new record number of students in the college, more than 3,400. And this year we saw greater growth in enrollment on campus than on e-campus. We saw growth in both, and for several years it's been more growth on e-campus than on campus, but this year we see more growth on campus, which is really exciting. I chalked that up to maybe the fact that we have a dedicated recruiter now, and we're actively recruiting FFA students as well as other students, recruiting both at the state level FFA convention, but also we recruited at the National FFA Convention this year. We also have record research dollars in growth. We make up 30% of OSU's research dollars. And we're preparing for the legislative session. We've been able to do a lot of hiring in the past year, being able to replace positions that have been vacant for quite a while because of receiving continuing service level in the past biennium with some extra dollars to make up a bit of the past. So we're really hopeful in this next session that we'll receive continuing service level. And we're very focused on economic development in the state. Yesterday you toured Hatfield Marine Science Center, and that's a great opportunity. I would just point out that of the OSU people at Hatfield, about 80% of those people are in the College of Ag Sciences, I would say, something about like that, of the OSU people there. There's many other groups of people there, but so because the Marine Mammal Institute is under the college, as well as the Coastal Oregon Marine Experiment Station, one of our 14 locations of experiment stations across the state. And you might be thinking, wow, everywhere the board goes in the state, there's a station. Yeah, yes, we're very fortunate. And I would just say, most states don't have 14 locations. They have 2, 3, 4. So like we did in Burns, like we did in Hermiston, I've asked the director of the Coastal Oregon Marine Experiment Station, James Sulikowski, to join us this morning and give a little presentation. You also have a flyer I put out for you on what the station does, how it supports agriculture in the state with both locations in Newport and Astoria. So I'll let James come up and go through his information.
All right. Well, thank you for this opportunity. It's great to be here. I've only been here in this position for 18 months, so this is my first sort of meeting. It was great to meet everybody a couple of nights ago. I'm looking forward to telling you a little bit about what the Coastal Oregon Marine Experiment Station does, as we affectionately call it, COOMS. Okay, I think we can flip through the first. Okay, so real importantly, I think I alluded to it last night or the night before, is that one of our goals here is keeping seafood on the menu. And how do we do that? So a little bit of history of our experiment station. We were actually founded in 1989. And a bunch of faculty got together with fishers and deans and went to legislature, and we were founded. So you can click slide. You can just click. Oops. Oh, that's okay. Yep. And if you look at all the experiment stations that Stacy just mentioned, they are spread out all over. You can click the state. The red are the ones that Stacy helps to manage. The two blue, I guess purplish up there, are the Coastal Oregon Marine Experiment Station. You visited Newport, and we have another facility up in Astoria. All right, you can click. Okay, and so collectively, we're the largest and most diverse applied marine research organization in Oregon. And what's great about what we do is that we run the gamut on seafood. We are both pre-harvest and post-harvest research and integrating with our stakeholders. And the stakeholders really is the seafood industry, whether it be commercial fishermen, those in aquaculture, seafood processors. We run along the coast. Okay, you can click. And our mission is to really conduct research that directly impacts those stakeholders. Their coastal communities, the nation and the world. We have faculty not only working locally, but also globally. And what the ultimate goal is really to sustain the marine industries and the resources that are in our oceans and our coastal communities. We're really big on fostering partnerships and working collaboratively with our stakeholders, but also across NGOs, federal and state partners. And this work is interdisciplinary and it's collaborative. And I think that's what makes our work special, is that we help to solve problems with our constituents. You can click. So I'll tell you a little bit about Coombs Newport. I'll start there, which you toured. Hatfield's a wonderful place. We're nestled within that. And the work that goes on there is all pre-harvest. Okay, so what's happening in the ocean to those resources. So you can click. And so we do a lot. We hit a lot of different areas. You can go back, sorry. Everything from environmental contaminants, for marine fisheries and population dynamics. We have work on marine megafauna, not whales, but sharks and other large animals moving around. We have a big impact and footprint in fisheries and conservation genomics. You can click. So within that framework, okay, some of the ways in which we are integrating with our communities and our stakeholders, you can do it, click, is through population structure and genetic monitoring, particularly in salmon. You know, a great example is how our hatchery fish, you know, leaving river systems and coming back and reproducing. How are they impacting local populations? A lot of our work has to do with climate change. We've got research on rockfish up and down the Oregon coast and beyond, and seeing how life history is changing. How does climate change affect larval fish? How do food webs, are they impacted with climate change and other fishing kind of techniques? And we also do a lot of marine spatial planning, working within marine reserves, offshore wind, and how all those may impact commercial fishing. But really, the ultimate goal here is to, you can click the next, is for better stock assessment and management. So how do we, keep fish in the ocean, but also how do we also allow the fishing communities to make a living? And I can tell you right now that Oregon has one of the best managed commercial fishing industries in the United States, probably globally. It's unbelievable. And as you heard from Yelena and Crystal and Erica, that we have a lot of underutilized resources. And we're helping, our constituents to figure out how do we use those. All right, click. We also have a big footprint in aquaculture. It all started with the molluscan broodstock research, and that has morphed into strong collaborations with the USDA. And the work that's really focused with those groups is really on how do we build a better oyster. And how do we make them more resilient to climate change, to disease? And we actually grow those oysters at Hatfield and Coombs, and we distribute them to local growers so that they have resources that can withstand those pressures. We work in mitigation. We're helping growers develop pesticides for sand shrimp, ghost shrimp. We're working with our growers to more sustainably harvest as well. We have we're working with a suction harvester technique. And we also are into seaweed as well. That's an up and coming industry, and both edible for us, but also as a food source for other animals, urchins and cows, of all things. So a lot of engagement there. All right, click. So Astoria, which you didn't get to tour, is our seafood lab. We affectionately call it as such. And that's our post-harvest. So what happens to the fish after it's been caught? Click. And that all started in the 1940s as a Seafood Research and Education Center. And the Coombs Associate Director and Director of that facility, Christina DeWitt, has done an amazing job of sort of running and creating opportunities with our stakeholders in that realm. And really, we are a one-stop shop there, which makes it very advantageous to working with the community. We can do all sorts of different processing. We have a chemical analytical lab. We have a pilot facility. We have a microbiologist in a facility up there where we can actually look at pathogens within food. We can determine shelf life within food, and we can look at the biochemical properties, nutritional properties as well. And of course, we've got the Seremi School as well. So we've really we really engage with the community as the fullest extent as we can. And some examples of that work, you can click. And Erica talked a little bit about this. We've worked with the Albacore Foundation at mercury contents, nutritional contents, Pacific Seafood, a huge processor in our area on shelf life of various products, working at developing fertilizers, in Seremi looking at cryoprotection. So you name it, we can do it in that facility. I can click. But that's not all we do. We do a lot of training and engaging as well. A lot of it has to do with seafood safety in the industry. When a fish is caught, how do you maintain it on board so that when it gets to a processor, it's in edible shape? A lot of that work really is designed to better provide practices that are needed in industry for better handling. And so that engagement is really important as we think about what we want to do in the future to help the industry. All right, next. So how do we keep seafood on the menu? That's some examples, right, of how we engage with our stakeholders. But if you click through some of the needs that I think we're focused on here in the future, and I want to kind of reiterate what Erica and Elena and Crystal all said. Now, Erica and Elena are both on my advisory board. And so we've been able to revamp that in a bit so that we can work with the priorities of our stakeholders. And if you click through, you can just click through all of these. Some of the things that we're really interested in is 100% utilization of the fish. A fish comes in and it's $5 a pound, for the flesh. But if you stake that out really to what else it could be providing the community, that fish in some areas of the world goes from $5 a pound to $5,000. So there's a huge opportunity there. Marketing is really important as well. You heard Elena talk about tilapia. It's a major issue. If you look at rockfish compared to tilapia, it's more nutritious, right? And so how do we market that to our stakeholders, to provide that resource to the community? The EQ are major issues that we're working with the industry on right now. But one of the things I'm really excited about is how do we connect seafood, right, to other experiment stations, right, to other agricultural aspects, potatoes, right, fish and chips. I think Marcus had mentioned something on that order. The wine industry, you pair a wine with a fish. It's a natural sort of connection there. And I mean, honestly, if you look at that fish on that image up there, I mean, who wouldn't want to, pair a great wine with a great fish? So those are things that we're interested in pursuing as we kind of move out. We sort of lay the groundwork for that as we kind of move forward. And so the last slide just gives you a little bit more information. You can click it one more. That if you want more information on the branch experiment stations, that last link kind of takes you to a description and kind of how we're all connected. And we want to continue to work with each other and help our stakeholders. So that's
excellent. Yeah, thank you, James. I appreciate you being here today. It's good for folks to see what we're doing all across the state. Great work.
Yes. Thanks, James. Thanks, Dean Simonich. And I know we're running a titch bit late, but are there any burning questions here for this?
I'm intrigued about the seaweed.
Yes.
How would that be harvested? I can't wrap my brain around it.
It's grown. It's in a tank, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it's aquaculture. And so it's amazing how quickly it grows. Yeah, and it can be produced.
Great. Well, I'll just say, I mean, the tour yesterday was absolutely phenomenal and just actually kind of mind-blowing, and the way we could look at other linkages in agriculture. Anyway, many thanks to both of you for a great presentation. The tour yesterday, again, was top-notch. So, good. Thank you.
Absolutely. I have to run. I'm really sorry. My information is on there. Actually, I have another meeting put together by the dean that I got to get to.
You know, she's tough.
I know.
She's tough. Thanks, James. All right. Well, kind of wrapping up our learning at this meeting is an opportunity to look at the collaboration that we as ODA have with Coastal Agriculture, Dairies, and Fisheries as our next item on the agenda. And I think, again, the setup was great because we had a chance to listen to the commissions and industry folks yesterday, or actually 2 days ago in the evening, and now having a chance to be able to hear how all this links together. So I think we've got Rusty Rock, and Eric Garman coming forward, and Dr. Ryan Schultz, so who will also give us an update on recent events that he's been a little busy with. So.
All right. Well, good morning, board. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for having us, and thank you for allowing us to share some of the things that we're doing at the Oregon Department of Agriculture. And yeah, I guess I'll just get started. Next slide, please. So the first things first, my name is Eric Garman, a trade development manager for the Oregon Department of Agriculture. My role and the role in the marketing department is to help grow and expand markets through economic development for our food and agricultural products. And next slide, please. I wanted to start a little bit about the history of seafood in Oregon and the marketing behind marketing and the growth of seafood in Oregon. First of all, our region here is rooted in the history of sustainable fishing. It really began with the Native American communities. They were harvesting salmon for their families. It's a nutritious delight, really, that's been happening for centuries prior to where we are today. And eventually, the Native Americans started trading salmon with the Hudson Bay explorers for provisions and for other types of products, and that really started the history of the trade in seafood. And in the early 1900s, with the invention of gasoline motors, and the waters of the Pacific Northwest became accessible for larger fishing opportunities. And this is where we started to find the abundance of the seafood that we have in the Pacific off the coast of Oregon. By the 1960s, this abundance caught up with the rest of the world, and unfortunately, these international fleets came, and some of their practices really harmed the ocean and the ecosystem here in Oregon. And there were some major concerns that were coming up in the 1960s about, you know, who had the right to fish Oregon waters. By the 1970s, that marked a turning point, and some landmark laws were established. The Fishery Conservation and Management Act was established in the 1970s. This really strengthened the regulations of who could fish, the Oregon waters. And what it did is establish some boundaries where some of the international fishers could only be within 200 miles of the Oregon coast and fish. But at this point, the damage was done. And so we saw a lot of the populations of our groundfish and some other species really decline. Some of the larger vessels that came into the area, they really dredged the ocean floor, and it really created some issues for the ecosystem. Up to the 1990s, we established the Sustainable Fisheries Act, which introduced the concept of maximum sustainable yield, which established the first ever limits now on fish that we could catch out of Oregon seafood. This was a critical step to really build back our species in the Oregon oceans. By the 2000s, more collaborative efforts happened. The Pacific Fisheries Management Council was established, and now at this point they set aside 20,000 square miles that were unfishable. So as you can imagine, that had a huge effect on our fishing industry, but it did start for a remarkable comeback and a remarkable sustainable recovery of some of these species now becoming endangered. What was expected to take a century took 20 years, and within that 20 years we had a build back of our species, some of them which you've probably had a chance to taste last night, our rockfish, some of our other ground fish. I had the black cod myself, which is lovely. And in 20 years, we were remarkable. And now, as as Yelena and as Crystal and Erica mentioned on our first night, we have available species to sell. And so that's going to take me into sort of the next part of my my program here. Some of the things that we do around seafood. The Oregon Department of Agriculture, as you all know, is a very diverse department. We have a lot of managers here that do very different things. I work at, working in the marketing department. Our goal is to help promote our products. So I'm going to talk a little bit more now about how we market seafood specifically. We're on the coast. We're in Newport. And the first thing we do is we identify, where are the challenges, where are the opportunities, and how do we pinpoint that in our marketing department? We also work with local and foreign governments on official trade. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a program that we did on an international level. I'm also going to talk a little bit about some of the farm to school farm to school projects that we're working on as well. But I want to give you some example on some of the foreign government and trade projects that we worked on. In the last 2 years, we worked with industry stakeholders here, as well as foreign governments in the EU, to establish some new quotas for our Oregon pink shrimp, which is a delight. If you haven't had it, you should try it. It's wonderful, and it's in full abundance. We had the opportunity to negotiate a quota from 2,000 metric tons to 4,000 metric tons a year and a half ago. So what that means is that initially we had 2,000 metric tons in the EU that didn't have a tariff that was attached to it, and what that allowed us to do as an industry was to establish new markets. We'd filled that 2,000 metric ton every year. That was spoken for. Now we have opportunities to jump into new markets like the UK or the Netherlands or other parts of Europe, and really start to build our shrimp program. Another project that we had been working on with our foreign government officials in the United Kingdom, we recently negotiated a zero tariff on our pink shrimp as well. The UK is the #1 pink shrimp consuming country in the world. And thanks to our leadership at the Oregon Department of Agriculture, together we wrote letters, we did a lot of work to establish a zero tariff, not only on our pink shrimp, but also our sablefish, black cod. This is a tremendous opportunity for our processors in Oregon to really establish and get into a market which was untouchable. A 20% tariff, you can't even have a conversation. Now we can get in there and we can do some promotions and we can really open up that market. If you haven't had a pink shrimp sandwich, I encourage you to go to London and have one. They're delicious. So we're excited about that. We've established some market access there, and we're just waiting for the okay. With the turn of the administration at a federal level, everything's on hold. So I'm hopeful that maybe the next board meeting I'll get invited back to tell you that, yes, we are in the UK, and come with me. Let's go. Next slide, please. So on behalf of my colleague, Amy Gilroy, I really want to praise the work that her and her team are doing on behalf of Farm to School. As you all know, and I'm sure you've heard this story before, but the Farm to School program has $10 million, which is primarily for the procurement of food, agricultural products, including seafood. And the ODA manages a portion of these funds, and some of it is also granted out for machinery and equipment to help enable producers to be able to sell into schools. And of course, my colleague Amy would be able to do it more justice than I am, but we're really proud of that program in our marketing department. And we just granted 12 awards, most recently of $500,000. Looking ahead, the funding is expected to remain consistent in the new biennium, and so we're excited to see that program continue to thrive. We're also active. Next slide, please. We're also active in participating to a Seafood to Schools program. Again, working alongside our partners, the Seafood Commodity Commissions, along with you may have met some of the groups, the Oregon Coastal Visitors Association. They have been very instrumental in how do we get the seafood served more locally, whether it's in the restaurants, the institutions, or into the schools. And so they've been an active participant in that as well. Right now, we're identifying the seafood products that are suitable for schools. Pink shrimp, again, being a very obvious one. The kids really love that. But then also understand the demand. What are the schools looking for? And then, of course, addressing some of the supply chain issues, which we have in all of agriculture. Just to give you a statistic, with the efforts of the Farm to School program, in the past year, schools have purchased 50%. Let me see if I can say this right. Amy coached me on this, but in the last 8 years, 50% of the sales of seafood to schools happened last year. Make sense? Okay. Yeah. So the program's working, and so that's a lot of that's a lot. That's a huge uptick in seafood. We're hopeful that there's some new USDA programs that are coming available, funding coming available for procurement that hopefully will continue to grow that seafood number. Having seafood on the plate for kids is amazing, especially when you're in Bend, Oregon, or if you're in Burns, Oregon. Having seafood from our state is amazing. Next slide, please. The ODA is also providing a suite of culinary tools. As you can see on the screen, there's some seafood videos that have been prepared. Looking at the numbers, looking at the video counts, this has been a very, very popular part of our new website for Farm to School, because schools just don't know what to do with seafood. It's just not. It's a non-traditional product, and so these tools here are to help these cooks, these chefs, these culinary buyers for schools to really understand, okay, what can we do with this piece of fish? And so our goal is just to continue to put that work out there on behalf of seafood. To address some of these issues and some of these food service problems in terms of not knowing how to prepare the seafood, we have worked with Oregon State University. So these were actually these videos were done at the Food Innovation Center in Portland, and OSU from the Oregon OSU Seafood Lab out in Astoria all the way to the Food Innovation Center. They have been partners arm in arm on these projects. So thanks again to OSU. Next slide. So what are the schools buying? Most of the seafood is purchased frozen, which is actually a very sustainable way to buy your seafood. And schools often purchase from the prior season, so they have supply year-round, when they need it, when they want to put it on their menus. And then these purchases are typically done using the farm-to-school dollars that are allocated from Oregon. So the system is working, the farm-to-school program is working, and it's working for seafood at the moment. So thank you, and I'm going to move on now to some other international projects that we're working on. So most recently, the Oregon Department of Agriculture teams up with USDA, as it does in many program areas, and the USDA does play a crucial role on some of the projects that we're doing internationally. Just to give you a little background on the Foreign Ag Service, the FAS as we call it, there are 95 different offices throughout the world, and they have over 350 staff. And so we have access as trade partners and economic development to access these partners throughout the world. And this is not only do they provide funding for the work that we do to promote Oregon, but also the wherewithal in terms of the expertise. Next slide, please. We work with different private and private and public partnerships through the USDA. There are over 70 cooperatives. The cooperatives include some of the on the list that you see on the screen, but these cooperatives help promote a particular commodity. But as it's related to seafood, there's only one seafood-related cooperative, and that's Alaska Seafood. And as much as we love to collaborate with Alaska, that's their program. And we do have similar species, but they're not promoting Oregon seafood. So there are other methods of funding that we have to apply for as a state. Next slide, please. In addition to these cooperatives, we also work with what we call state regional trade groups. The one in particular that we work with, next slide please, is WUSADA, the Western U.S. Agriculture Trade Association. It covers the 13 western states, plus Guam and America Samoa. And these states have access to USDA funding to help promote that particular region of the United States. Next slide, please. So some of the USDA endorsed trade shows that we attend, they have over 30 different international trade shows annually that we work with. One in particular that we work with is the Seafood Expo Global, which is in Barcelona each year. This is the world's largest seafood trade show, and so this is where we have an opportunity to access buyers for our seafood from around the world. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we're doing currently is we're working closely with both the local stakeholders as well as federal governments and seafood commissions, et cetera, representing our fishermen and processors to bring our products to other markets. In 2018, we applied for a USDA agriculture trade promotion grant, and it was designed to introduce Oregon products internationally. With this funding, we established a long-term marketing strategy that was specifically for Oregon seafood. And we created target materials, recipes, marketing campaigns, and we worked with chefs and also collaborated with culinary talent to create unique menu items that were specific and specific for each market. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we did through this grant were, first of all, we established a website, pnwseafood.net. We launched that website to allow for buyers and for consumers to have a sort of a comprehensive background of seafood from Oregon. We created descriptions of the species as well as the health benefits. We also created this resource. Creating this resource took months, but we worked with local fishermen, the processors, the commissions, and built a collection of videos, lots of photos. We also have historical information about our fisheries to tell the story of Oregon seafood and also to connect with a broader audience. In my experience going out and telling the story of Oregon, some of the markets that I'm in, they don't even know where Oregon is. I have to say it's above Hollywood. We're nestled between California and the Canadian border. But when I do tell the story of the historical facts of Oregon seafood, it really does perk these folks up, and they really do start to pay attention of our history. Next slide, please. We do a lot of research. We don't just rely on our intuition for these strategies. The Oregon Department of Agriculture works closely with local research firms as well as international research firms to fine-tune our projects, whether they're local or across the globe. We work with a group called Euromonitor International, we gather international trends around seafood, and then this gives us a clearer picture of where should we be focusing our time and our efforts. So everything that we do is very intentional. Next slide, please. We work on trade shows. As I mentioned before, the Seafood Expo Global will be attending that again in May of 2025. If I would encourage anybody that's interested in learning more about that trade show and the effects to reach out to me directly. But we host tastings. We bring culinary chefs from Oregon with us. We also do chef collaborations with groups from Europe and other countries on how would you prepare the seafood, how would we prepare the seafood. We have a lot of fun with it. But we also have a lot of business-to-business meetings and effectively bringing our products across the globe. The next project. We work on seafood master classes as a part of our strategy. This is where we bring together the industry experts to discuss the benefits of our seafood in an open forum. In this particular photo here, it was winter of 2022 at the Launceston Place, which featured Chef Ben Murphy after he just won National Chef of the Year. So needless to say, you do not see me in that picture because I am sitting in the back room because everybody showed up. This was the same competition that Chef Gordon Ramsay won in 1992, and it was really the perfect atmosphere for these influencers and buyers and industry to talk about our seafood in an open forum. Next slide, please. We also conduct inbound missions. This is where we bring groups into Oregon. This is such a magical time for folks that have a lot of times never been to Oregon, of course, and even that, some of them have never been to the U.S. They get to experience the Oregon coast, and we take them, thanks to our industry, we take them behind the scenes, and it's a magical tour. They get to see behind the scenes at the processors. They get to meet with experts from Oregon State University, which is always on the agenda, and it really is an opportunity for these buyers and influencers from different countries to experience Oregon. And we're all here because of the Oregon experience, right? Because it's magical and it's like no other. So to see it through the eyes of these influencers and buyers that come, it is a magical thing to do. Next slide. We also do restaurant promotions. It sounds like the fish and chips program with the Oregon Potato Commission is a hot topic. We collaborate with restaurants. In this case, we collaborated with a restaurant group in the United Kingdom, and we did do a fish and chips program with our hake and rockfish. And we're continuing to do these types of promotions. What do the consumers really think about our products on the menus? Next slide, please. We also have earned media. In this case, we have press releases that are sent out, whether it's sent out from the Oregon Department of Agriculture or contractors that we work with internationally. But we have several different media hits and news stories. Most recently, I was just interviewed by the Undercurrent, which is a UK seafood news organization on behalf of where's the UK fish and chips, project going on behalf of Oregon. So they're continuing to reach out to us and ask us questions about our projects. So they're definitely paying attention. Next slide, please. So what is next? This is part of a 5-year program. What's next for us? We recognize that there's a high investment needed to open up markets that were non-existent prior to us opening them up. And most recently, the USDA launched a program which they call the Regional Agriculture Promotional Program, or RAP. There was $1.2 billion that was initiated, and it was through a bipartisan request from the United States Senate. They're focused on reaching beyond some of the traditional markets that we've talked about in the EU, some of them including Africa, Southeast Asia, and South America, amongst others. But since then, they have opened up this project to the United Kingdom and the EU as well. Next slide, please. So what are our challenges? Funding. I think funding is the challenge for most program areas. Just like anything else, the projects that the Oregon Department of Agriculture writes on behalf of Oregon Seafood, they are evaluated and scored and voted within a larger group of states. This makes it competitive, and the process is selective. So many states that are part of this voting or this decision-making process are not coastal states. So we do have to, the Oregon Department of Agriculture Marketing Group has to defend Oregon Seafood on a pretty regular basis on why we should allocate funding towards Oregon Seafood. And so at the end of the day, though, how do we measure success? And thanks to WUSADA, the USDA, they do a pretty thorough process of measuring the return on investment. In most cases, every dollar that's spent for the work that we're doing comes back at $24 in return. So we're very proud of that number, and we want to keep that number, and that includes the seafood projects that we've worked on. We also have domestic strategy issues and challenges. As Yelena mentioned our first night, the domestic funding does not come from the federal funding. Federal funding is exclusively for international projects. We do have a robust farm-to-school program, as I'd mentioned earlier, and that does come from state. But anything regional, selling products into California, selling products into Washington State, or even beyond, is a challenge. But our team is continuing to look at opportunities, working with larger groups to find funding and help in the domestic space. Next slide, please. Thank you for having me. That concludes my my marketing update on seafood. Thank you.
Great. Maybe we could have a few questions right now, and I think we've got time and we can keep on schedule. So yes, Dean Simonich.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Eric for his good work and close collaboration with OSU. We really partner well together. You know, as I think about the domestic issue, I think folks my age and myself growing up in the public schools in Wisconsin, fish sticks were on the menu and they weren't good. So for people my age, we're battling that misconception. Some of the work out of the Food Innovation Center has actually shown that blind tested, consumers cannot tell the difference between fresh and frozen fish if it's frozen correctly. So we have to battle that misperception. I think it's great in terms of the farm or seed to school, farm to school program that hopefully we're changing the minds of younger students, people, so that as they grow up, they'll appreciate Oregon seafood more and more. So great work.
Thank you.
Great.
Barbara Boyer. I too echo the fish sticks because we grew up with Fish Fridays in my house and codfish cakes. I really hope I never see it again. So just because they were not, well prepared. Maybe I'll try them as an adult. Couple of questions. So am I correct in saying that Oregon is the only state with a farm to school program in the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Education?
I don't have an answer to that.
No? I think we are.
Okay.
I think I remember that. So,
Nodding in the back.
aren't we? I do too.
Okay.
I think that's really.
Oregon was the first
Oh, okay.
to have
There's more.
a program in the Department of Agriculture and
Okay.
the Department of Education.
I think that's really neat. So they're in UK. They're promoting it as Pacific seafood, not Oregon seafood. The pink shrimp.
Yes. So funding again is tricky. Many times when we promote Oregon seafood, we have to promote more than one state with federal funds through WUSADA. And so what we do is we promote Pacific Northwest seafood, which includes Northern California, Oregon, and Washington. Oregon does land the most seafood that we've been talking about, and we're really the leaders with our commodity commissions, and we collaborate very, very well with our sister states of Washington and others.
And did you want to add?
I would just add, so I think it's important to remember in terms of our economic development team, we have staff funded through state dollars, but the project work that we do it on the federal dollars and through WUSADA. More so. And so we really rely on that collaborative Western States collective for funding projects internationally.
So then the RAP funding, so the regional funding, that map is the WUSADA map? Do they coincide?
Yeah, so the RAP funding is for all the MAP cooperatives that we saw on that first initial list, as well as the state trade associations like WUSADA. So that $1.2 billion is for the entire group. And so we have a portion of it. A lot of times the portion is based on they have a method of measuring who gets what. Yeah.
Great. Any other questions? Eric, thank you. And again, this is... Yes.
Sorry,
that's
Miguel
all right.
Lopez for the record. Eric, so you talked about international trading with UK and with the EU countries and affiliation with that, going beyond those boundaries historically. Without the support from those markets, how would Oregon fisheries do?
I think we have a lot of work to do locally and domestically to sell. Just like other agricultural products, we have more agricultural products than we can consume locally. The processors, which is a small group, I mean, there's a small handful of processors. They've been doing a lot of international work for a long time. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to continue to build that. At the same time, we are trying to feed our local community as well. It's just that I talked about the species, and that some of them were on the endangered species list for a long time. People don't know what rockfish is. People don't know our products. Even people in Oregon, probably people on the coast. And so it's about education now, and it's about building those markets. And so without international markets, I would say it's a 50-50 right now. Half of it's probably being sold regionally. California is a big market for us. The other half is international. So without those markets, I think it would be a struggle to sell all of the seafood that we have.
Lisa Sharplow Hansen for the record. So Eric, thinking about it in the domestic market, how much opportunity do we see if we got into some of the larger population hubs, Chicago, et cetera?
It's tricky. It's all tricky. It's most people in Chicago, and I don't want to make a blanket statement, but a lot of folks from the Midwest they get their seafood from where they know, like Red Lobster, or some of the so they're more familiar with some of the brands and some of the species that are more well known. But also around the coastal communities, there's preference, right? So we have Dungeness crab, but Texas has blue crab. So it's tricky, but I think a good start is starting in the culinary sectors, like working with chefs, working with some of the higher end, and even the middle of the road restaurants, to introduce some of our species and brand them. What's so unique about rockfish? Because you can do anything with it. It's like a tilapia. It's a white fish, right? So you can bread it, you can cook it, and then eventually probably getting into the major retailers, Kroger and others. Pacific Seafood, Bornstein's, they have branded product that are in these program areas right now, but it's a small shelf next to your fish counter. We haven't had an opportunity to expand domestically yet, so that strategy could change. So I think it's open to what's the best fit for it.
Great. Yes.
Sorry, I can't keep my mouth shut. Lindsay Eng for the record. I just wanted to also add that there's a pretty strong international need for our high-end seafood. So if you look at, depending on the species, like particularly Dungeness crab, I'll use that. Over the past 10 years, the live buyers of Dungeness crab, which are not our traditional processors, that's really shifted a lot of the industry, and that's all almost exclusively going to Asia and Vancouver, BC, and high-end restaurants in California, But so that's really shifted it, but they're getting better prices for it. So that's one way that the international markets are really important to our fisheries, because many times for the things that are unique to Oregon, we're getting better prices, and that allows us to continue fishing to, support our processors and be able to continue fishing. The other thing I wanted to mention is I think looking to Alaska seafood marketing is a good indication of what kind of state support for domestic would look like. They've really invested in that, both internationally but also domestically. So in those East Coast markets, in the Midwest markets, they know Alaska seafood. It's been identified and it's really clear. And that's what that investment does for the fishery.
Okay.
Thank you.
One more question, and then we have to move on. This has been great. Thanks.
Josh Zielinski, I can wait if you don't want to answer it. I kind of wanted to ask the other night when the commissioners, or the different commissioner directors were in here, but how many seafood processors are there in this state? And we heard about like a consolidation, and there's less buyers, and it's something that all of ag is, I think, facing. We certainly are in my part of the state. But I'm just curious about that, and like obviously you need to have a good connection with them, so it might be easier to have less of them. But I don't know.
So we actually have an official list, our food safety list, or the ODF&W has a licensing list that they're actually there are a handful, but not a lot. It's a very small group. I don't have the exact number, but what I can say is that the projects that we're working on internationally, it requires more volume, and so there are probably maybe 3 or 4 that can actually handle the volume. We also go into Washington State as well. Westport, Washington has a handful. And a lot of our Oregon fishermen land their product in Washington as well. So that's why we work very closely with them. But it's not a big group. It's not, sometimes it's a struggle to get enough people to sign up for a program that we do, because it's a very small group. But on the local level, there are a lot of fishmongers, and there are a lot of fishers that are selling directly from the boat, or selling directly to restaurants, or working through those channels. So there is an abundance of that happening. And we're trying to work, again, with partners like the Oregon Coastal Visitors Association. And then it looks like James is also working very closely as well with them. How do we increase that? How do we increase more seafood being sold, in the state? So it's a combination, for that, it's a combination of both.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. We better move on. And I don't know, Ryan, are you next, or is Rusty? Rusty, great. Thank you.
So I'm going to touch on a couple of highlights, and we'll probably circle back and do a full food safety presentation at our next board meeting, because I don't want to rush through it. Food safety is kind of the glue that holds everything together between all of these, the marketing, the public health. Am I too far away? There's a lot to it. And I really feel like the presentation that Ryan is going to give is where there's a lot of really current burning issues and questions. So I'm going to kind of gloss through some stuff, and I'll talk about what's going on. Shellfish. I think I'll stick with the coastal stuff. So the shellfish industry. Hold on. Skipping through. The food safety program is tasked with working with ODF&W. ODF&W is kind of the recreational side, and then the Department of Agriculture's food safety program oversees the commercial side of the shellfish industry. So we have we do a lot of testing. So we send staff to the beaches to go clamming, and we collect those samples, send them to our lab, our regulatory lab, and they're going to test them for domoic acid, test it for the paralytic shellfish toxins, so all those biotoxins. Because shellfish are really, hope everybody got to enjoy some last night, they're a filter feeder. So whatever's in the water is going to get concentrated up in the tissues of those animals, and they're frequently consumed raw. So that's why we have to watch that so carefully, and some people will consume quite a few of them. So we're, to protect the industry, to protect the public, we do a lot of testing, and it's a pretty heavy lift. We're sending people out to the coast at 4 a.m. To go out digging at low tides, because it's really tidally based. You can't collect shellfish at high tide; it doesn't happen. And our folks are really good at it, and it kind of amazes me. I've gone on a few of those before, where it's pitch black. They've got lots of headlights on. Provide them with lots of lighting and lots of tools. They wear life jackets with the alert systems on them as well, just to make sure that we're providing optimum safety. They're very good at what they do. They know not to go anywhere near. If the weather is bad, we're not going to get out where we're going to see interaction with the ocean. But something that's always on our minds, and we pay careful attention to that. The other thing that's part of that with the shellfish industry is they are very heavily regulated. So think on the order of what our dairy industry sees, the shellfish industry sees the same thing. And part of that reason is not only because it's frequently consumed raw, but because some of the diseases that we're concerned about related to that, like hepatitis or something, if you've got an outflow of bad water, you could have a hepatitis virus in the water, and the shellfish will pick it up. So we're monitoring for that stuff. But hepatitis has like a 90-day period before you'd see it. So we require a very long traceability that's formalized into the shellfish program, and we do a lot of trace back exercises to make sure that we're on top of it and minimizing that risk to the public. The other part of our shellfish program is our shellfish plat leasing program, and I think in the upcoming session we're going to see a lot of excitement around the shellfish plats. The Department of Agriculture picked up the responsibility of approving those leases probably 15, maybe 20 years ago. We collect a lot of public input from the federal government, the Corps of Engineers, from ODF and W, looking at what the environmental impacts of it. And what you'll hear in the legislative session coming up is about eelgrass and that kind of intersection of the salmon habitats that the eelgrass represents and the shellfish commercial industry, where their economic need is, if you're hand harvesting, which is what would preserve the eelgrass, then there's not a lot of economic viability. There's a long history of dredging to collect the shellfish after they've seeded the flats, and that dredging process will also potentially rip out the eelgrass and modify that habitat. I'm not an expert on those things, so that's why we rely on ODF and W and some of our external partners. So, and the crux of what you'll see coming out of the legislative session is the plats, the public lands that are being leased by these companies, that some of them have been in place for, since the 50s, or maybe even longer, because the records get pretty sketchy at that point. Once they have that lease, it is in perpetuity, as long as they continue to pay their taxes on the fees and they harvest the areas that they're allowed to harvest from, so keep it in production with no minimums. They can continue to do what they've always done. And some of the older leases, in fact, all of the older leases have no restrictions for, the environmental concerns that are now being brought up because of that understanding of that ecosystem, kind of what Eric was talking about. And, the way things were done in long ago led to broader environmental impacts. So, the salmon recovery process is really important to the Oregon economy and to the environment. And, having that space where they can have salmon, go through that portion of their life cycle is important. So there's probably going to be discussions in the legislative session. I say probably, it'll be a discussion on finding out if there's going to be an evaluation needed on a periodic basis of those plats, but it's statutory. So we as an agency follow what the law says, and the law says once they have a lease, they continue to do it. If they change the laws, we'll be responsive to whatever changes come from that legislative activity. Okay, so that's everything on shellfish. Carla, I'm probably going to have you start skipping a lot here. Oh, sorry, I skipped over crab, and crab is really important. Sorry. Slides. Yeah, there are the slides. So make sure I've got that. So the other bit of testing we do on the coast is related to the crab industry, and I think we heard a little bit about it yesterday from the commission, and we work in partnership with the Crab Commission, both with the fishermen and the processors, to collect samples to do that preseason testing, and then even during the season, and then we'll use our shellfish testing results as a sentinel for what the conditions are in the water, because the crabs in turn eat a lot of the shellfish as well. And then they're going to accumulate, if there's biotoxins in the shellfish, the crab will also accumulate those biotoxins in their guts and potentially spreading to the meat of the crab. But it doesn't affect the crabs as much as it affects us. We do see some, anecdotally, some effect on marine mammals, but that's ODF and W. We're looking at the human mammals. So we collect samples of the crab based off of what we see coming from the shellfish results, and looking for domoic acid again and the paralytic shellfish toxins. And once, like right now, we're in a condition where the coast was clear of domoic acid, so we shared that information with ODF and W. They're the ones that really run the commercial and recreational industries for openings and closures. We provide them those resources for testing through our lab services, and we collect the samples. We do the sample prep. We collect those samples from fishermen at the docks. Krista also put up the map that showed all the zones, so we collect samples from each zone. So fishermen will get the information of what zones we're looking for from ODF&W, and then they get the phone numbers of the food safety staff or ag services as we're starting to migrate to. And then we'll collect those crabs. We pay for the crabs, pay the fishermen at the dock for the crab, and then we will boil them, and then they will pick them and separate the viscera, the guts of the crab, from the meat of the crab, and then we'll send that to our lab where we'll conduct the testing. It's a pretty intensive process, and we've also learned we can't really rely on UPS. Shipping from the coast, unfortunately, is sometimes a next day process, sometimes it's 4 days. So in a lot of cases, we've ended up having to hand carry samples because they are irreplaceable. I mean, it isn't the value of the crab. It's now if we're waiting for that test result and it disappears for 4 days, yeah, the industry could be shut down for, 6 days because we lost a sample, which means now they got to go out and collect another sample. We got to cook it and pick it, and then, yeah. So we've moved to hand carrying a lot of those samples in the critical time frames. So it's a pretty engaged, collaborative process that we go through in the food safety program related to crab. Okay. So One Health, that's actually we'll circle back to One Health. Ryan will talk about that in his portion of the presentation. And then I'll just start saying skip here. So we'll skip lab services, and we're going to basically skip to the animal health presentation at this point, Carla. Here we go. There's Ryan a few years ago.
Yeah, it's been a couple.
Who's that young guy?
All right, before we turn it over to Ryan, any questions on the shellfish? And I actually did have a couple, but one was on the crab. You cook it and then you test. Is that because maybe there's a concentration of the acid, or instead of just testing it raw?
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie Castaway?
No.
With Tom Hanks when he's on the island.
Yeah. Okay.
The crab, and then he's super excited because he's now got dinner. He opens it up, and it just pours out because it's just a liquid.
Uh-huh.
We have to cook it to kind of congeal the flesh. Otherwise, it is literally just it would just all mingle and fall apart. And
Okay.
we need the cooking to set the meat of the crab, so then we can go in, crack them. It's essentially just like what you would do when you're eating them. So it serves the function of both allowing us to collect the meat and the viscera separately, but also it emulates what the consumer would see at the
consuming
of consumption. Yeah.
Okay. The second on the shellfish, and maybe when you had said the dredging, was that more clam, mussel versus oyster, or?
It's pretty much all oyster. So oysters are not a native species to Oregon waters, so they're farmed. Mussels, people are going to go collect. I don't think any big farms mussels, to my knowledge.
Okay.
They just go and they'll collect them recreational off the rocks. I think Washington does have some folks that farm mussels, but we don't in Oregon.
Well, what I was asking about, I visited an oyster farm in Rhode Island about a month ago, and they were in pouches. They had the same a plot lease situation, but they were actually in pouches. So there was no picking off the base of the estuary. It was actually suspended in pouches. So that's why I didn't realize, just to learn, I'm going to need to visit an oyster farm here in a more intimate way than I have before. So, okay.
Yeah, and I'm not super good on the oyster aquaculture processes. I know that there's a seeding process.
There is.
It takes a long period of time. I
few years.
Some of our folks, when they're doing that dredging, they'll dredge it into pouches at the bottom. So they'll have nets that'll catch, so they'll pull it up, and then they'll allow the dirt to fall back down and then capture the oysters in the netting. Then there's other folks that have strings, so they'll seed the strings and they'll put those out there, and then the oysters will grow on those strings. Some of them will put them on posts. I've seen that as well. All stuff that is found on the internet. That's where I do most of my learning about how those folks work. So yeah, I haven't heard of the pouch process, but and I think that's kind of the tricky thing about the food safety program is we are going into places where they are experts in their fields, and we're coming in and telling them how to do their jobs. So it's a delicate balance. So we try to keep up with the technology of everything that is food, but at the same time listen to hear how they're actually doing it and what they're saying the science is. Even if we know, it's better for us to go in with open eyes and absorb what we're learning from that process. So you go in with a little prep and then be willing to be both a student and a teacher concurrently to maintain the integrity of what you're trying to view without modifying it in the process and taking away the expertise that you're experiencing and conducting the visits and inspections.
Interesting. Thank you. Any other questions? Right, Ryan, we'll move on to you.
Okay. So Ryan Scholes, I'm the state veterinarian. And Carla, I'm going to apologize now. It looks like my slides got jumbled a little bit in here. We can go ahead and stay on the one you were on. I think we can start there, but I may have to have you bounce all the way back to the top of the food safety at some point. But so I'm a state veterinarian. It's a position that's actually statutorily provided. And the responsibilities of the state veterinarian are to act as the chief veterinary officer, the chief animal health officer for the state of Oregon. And so really my duties in that are related to the control and prevention and eradication of diseases in livestock that can impact livestock and that impact humans. And so I have kind of that dual role. Federally, I'm recognized as a state animal health official, so we have slightly different terminology in Oregon than we do at the federal level. And then so there's quite a few different, as Rusty mentioned, most of what we do is kind of statutorily provided for. So we have a really broad responsibility in statute for doing, as a department, to do whatever is necessary and proper to prevent the introduction of livestock diseases, the transmission of livestock diseases, to eradicate diseases that are here, and then to prevent the entry of animals that may be carrying or harboring those diseases. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Carla. So that's just kind of, that slide's just kind of the bullet points of those responsibilities. Really, most of what we do, the eradication of diseases really happened a generation ago. That was really looking at things like brucellosis, tuberculosis. Those were diseases that were common in our livestock industries going back 40, 50 years ago. Today, we don't really have as many of those type of long-standing diseases and eradication programs. Today, we're looking more at the diseases that come in and are introduced and preventing them from taking hold in our state. We operate statutorily. We operate in the realm of the term of livestock. But livestock means a lot of things, and it is defined really, really broadly. The definition's up there. I'm not going to read it, but essentially, livestock, for the purposes of our disease control statutes, means any terrestrial vertebrate that's in captivity. We're very unique as a state in that definition. A lot of states have very restrictive terminology of what livestock is. That's why we've seen some of the struggles with avian influenza in some of these states. When you see a case in a cat, if your definition of livestock is traditional livestock species, that's outside of that definition. Now the state vet can't do anything, right? And so we are very lucky that we are able to do that. Basically, if it's an animal and it's owned and it's not a fish are specifically exempted. We have this whole long definition, and then it says fish are not livestock. But pretty much everything else that's a vertebrate is considered livestock. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Carla. Okay, so we do quite a bit more than just the disease response as well. We also do animal disease traceability, which is a term that has been really big over the last couple months, but that's really, it's that traceability component within animal disease. So Rusty talked about it in the shellfish, that they have to be able to trace animals. We have to do the same thing. If we have a disease introduction, we have to be able to trace those animals back. A great example of that was foot and mouth in the UK back in the early 2000s. I think it was 2001, if I remember right, when they had that big outbreak. And many of you probably remember seeing the news stories and the piles of dead animals being burned in that country, which is not how we control that disease anymore. But that outbreak, it was huge. They had to euthanize more than 50% of the livestock in that country. There were, I want to say, in the neighborhood of around 30 farmers that committed suicide as a part of that response. It took well over a year to get it under control. How many of you guys knew there was another foot and mouth disease outbreak in 2006? It involved 4 farms. It was in the UK. It involved 4 farms. What they attribute that to was because they had, in those couple of years, they had implemented a national animal traceability program. They could trace every one of those animals, where they came from, where they went, and they were able to get their arms around that outbreak really fast. It cost them, that first one cost in today's terms like a sizable portion of their GDP to control it. That second outbreak cost less than $1 million to control, just because they were able to trace those animals. So that's what traceability is about. It's about being able to, if we have a disease outbreak, rapidly trace where those animals have been, where animals have gone. We do a number of disease certification programs. A lot of those are for diseases that either have been eradicated or controlled, but that there's still testing programs for it. So producers can get certified as free. We see this a lot in poultry, but they can get certified as free to be able to open up trade with other states easier, so they're not having to test every animal every time they're shipping them to another state. We also do a lot in the emergency and disaster response space. The Department of Agriculture is the lead organization for agricultural needs at the state level, and the animal health program takes the lead on animals, which is really the majority of what we see in the response phase. A lot of our other areas come in during the recovery phase, but during the initial response phase, a lot of that is our animal needs. And so we maintain a fairly sizable stockpile of sheltering supplies and equipment. We're working on growing that. And a lot of other resources and equipment that we can deploy to counties. We're not the ones setting up the shelter, but we're the disaster response, it's a county-led response, and so we are supporting those counties in whatever they need. We also have a lot of resources we can provide to counties on Blue Sky Days to help them in preparing for that. A lot of counties don't have the resources to have someone on staff that can do the disaster planning about animals, and so we have some different resources we've developed to be able to come in, walk alongside those counties, walk them through a workshop, walk them through a tabletop exercise to help them develop those plans at the county level, making sure all the right people are at the table and they can talk through those. There's some other licensing programs we have too. For some reason, someone decided the state vet should deal with alligators. I'm not complaining. They're kind of fun, but we do license dangerous exotic animals. That's a program that no new licenses can be issued after January 1st of 2010, so those are dwindling as those animals pass on, but we still do have a few active licenses, and then a few other things. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Carla, and I think this is where, okay, can we go back to the One Health slides that were at the beginning of food safety? Sorry, So when we talk about disease control, one of the big overarching things that we look at is this One Health, this concept of One Health. And the concept is that it's an integrated approach that looks at animals and the environment and people all as one, right? Diseases in animals often are impacted by environment and they impact people. Disasters are the same way, the environment, animals, people. So it recognizes that, and we really look at how, trying to break those silos down. The government is great at building silos, but really we have all these resources, we have all these responses that it's really important to break those down. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Carla. It's just kind of a visual representation of what One Health is. We spend a lot of time working on this model within Oregon, making sure that we have a very small program. We have a lot of expertise in one very small piece of this picture, right? I am not an expert in pesticides. I'm not an expert in disinfectants, but I use a ton of disinfectants, making sure that what we're doing with those disinfectants isn't adversely impacting the environment, making sure that the diseases we're controlling animals, we're also taking care of the people, because when your chickens have avian influenza, there's a very good chance that you may be exposed to avian influenza. And so trying to make sure that that's all one unified approach, that we can collaborate in the background to make sure that when we respond, it's with that in mind. So go ahead and go to one more. Yeah, go ahead and go to that next slide, Carla. So one of the cornerstones of this is animals are often the sentinels for diseases. As Russ talked about, bioaccumulating toxins from the environment. Disease spillover from the environment into animals. Ebola is a great example of that. We do not know what the reservoir of Ebola is. Ebola shows up in monkeys before it shows up in people. Avian influenza, we know the reservoir, but the reservoir for avian influenza is in the environment. It spills over into animals. That happens before it spills over into people most of the time. The environment impacts both animal health and human health. We've seen that with changing climates. The disease spillovers, and even the environmental things. That picture, that's a picture I really like using on this slide because it really highlights that environmental impact. That is that picture is of the town square right in the middle of Butte, California, or not Butte, Butte County. Paradise, California. So we actually had the opportunity, I had the opportunity to lead a team of 22 people that we deployed from the Department of Agriculture with some allied organizations in the aftermath of the Paradise Fire. That was the day that they opened that community back up to the people. But that is a huge, the environmental conditions there had a huge impact on people and on animals. We were there running one of the shelters. A month later, there were still over 1,000 animals in county-run shelters at that point in time, and an unknown number that had been displaced. And we were starting to see diseases pop up. They were seeing that in the human shelters. They were seeing respiratory outbreaks. They were seeing all these. So it's just all of these interconnected pieces. And so we spend a lot of time really focused on that, working with public health, working with our colleagues in other agencies and in other programs within ODA. So go ahead and, Carla, if you can go back down all the way now to that One Health in Action. So we'll go into a little bit on avian influenza now because it's a really good case study, I think, on One Health as well as a very current topic right now, especially just in the last 24 hours. So avian influenza virus, we hear it called bird flu a lot. It infects both wild and domestic poultry. So those chickens, turkeys, quail, they get sick from it, they die from it. Waterfowl and shorebirds get infected with it. They don't really get sick. They can carry it. Especially wild ducks, dabbling ducks, so the mallards, the teals, the ones that when you see them on water and they eat, you still see them. They go vertical, as opposed to the diving ducks that go all the way under. Diving ducks aren't really affected by this virus for whatever reason, but those dabbling ducks carry this virus. They don't get affected by it. That doesn't make them sick, but yet they can shed this virus for like 4 months. And so as they're flying, they're carrying that virus. Our shorebirds can also carry it. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Carla. So when we talk about influenza viruses, and especially avian influenza viruses, we divide them into two categories functionally: highly pathogenic and low pathogenicity viruses. That literally is, does it kill chickens or does it not kill chickens? Before the advent of PCR and all these advanced testing, the way that they determined if a strain was high path or low path was they infected 100 chickens and counted how many of them died. That really is the functional distinction between these viruses. Low path circulate naturally in North America. Highly pathogenic viruses don't. But there are some other strains. So we also refer to these by H and N numbers. So if you look at that picture, that's a depiction of an influenza virus. The H and N, it's hemagglutinin neuraminidase. Those are the receptor proteins on the surface of that virus. There's, I think, 13 neuraminidase. There's 18 different, or 13 hemagglutinins, 18 neuraminidase, if I'm remembering right. But so H5, the H5 and H7 are the only ones that can become highly pathogenic. That the the ability to become highly pathogenic is unique to those two hemagglutinins. So all the other viruses we really don't care about because they don't cause issues. It's just those H5s and H7s in poultry that we worry about. The strain we're seeing right now is a Eurasian strain. It's not naturally found in North America. It does circulate in the wild in Europe or in Asia. Most of these viruses pose little if or no threat to humans until you start getting into those H5s. The H5 strains and H7 to a lesser extent are zoonotic. They can pass to humans. We haven't seen that prior to this year very much. This year we're seeing it a lot for whatever reason. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Carla. So the lineage on virus, those North American strains, I touched on this a little bit already, they circulate in the wild as lowly pathogenic. There's a few of them that can become high path, but they don't circulate that way. That Eurasian strain, the official name is Goose Guangdong A. It emerged in the late 90s in Guangdong province in China. It circulates in the wild as highly pathogenic. When it enters domestic birds, they are immediately dying from it. Whereas the North American strains, when they enter domestic poultry, it's a low path. We control it because they could become highly pathogenic, but they don't circulate that way. The other thing that's unique with influenza A viruses is their genome is in 5 sections, 5 individual pieces. And viruses, if you remember back to biology, they are not living. They rely on the host cell to reproduce. So where a lot of our concern comes from is if you get 2 viruses into the same cell, as they're reproducing, those 5 different distinct sections get jumbled up. And that's where we see what we call reassortment, where we get different chunks of those viruses coming out in different viruses, and you get a whole new virus. The concern that we are so worried about, why we were so worried about our pig that happened, is animals or people that are capable of being infected by a human strain and a high path strain, right? You get a human influenza A that is capable of infecting and transmitting among people, and this H5N1 that really doesn't infect people very well, but we know it can be highly pathogenic. If they start swapping genes around, that's how you can create a pandemic. And so we do a lot of work centered around making sure that never happens. That's really the end goal of this, is making sure that scenario can never happen. Go ahead and go to the next slide. We've kind of covered that. Go ahead and go to the next one. So our first case was we found on May 6th of 22. It was in Lynn County. It was about 100 free-ranging birds. It was a backyard flock. Most of our cases have been backyard flocks. We found a second one about 2 weeks later in Lane County. It was, again, about 450 birds. It was a backyard flock. And go next slide. So typically we expect that, and historically this has always been the case, by June 15th nationally we do not see avian influenza cases. The hot, dry weather, the virus just doesn't spread. So we expected that between that, the wild waterfowl settling down into their nesting grounds, everything else, we're not supposed to see cases during the summer, especially with those North American strains. And historically, when we've seen a Eurasian strain enter North America, it dies out over that summer period because there's just not reasonable opportunities to transmit. Go ahead and go to the next slide. But what actually happened, and I apologize, it's kind of hard to see there. So that first column, I believe, is May. The next one's June. Or no, maybe it's June, July. Either way, that spike is over the summer. We had, I think, 2 or 3 cases in June of that summer. And then we had 8 cases in Deschutes County within a 2-week period in July. Deschutes County is the epitome of hot and dry during the summer. But what we found was it was newly introduced into flyway, and all of these ducks had settled down into ponds and paired off in Deschutes County, those irrigation ponds. And there's a lot of people in Deschutes County that also have domestic ducks, because you have this pond, you see a pair of ducks, they land, they mate, they have babies, and you think, oh, it's so cute seeing these ducklings. So now next year you get your own because you want to make sure that happens every year. And then you realize that eggs are kind of nice to have your own, but duck eggs are really hard to find. They like to lay them in hidden places. They're not very reliable. So then you get some chickens, right? And so everyone's a big happy family until this happens. I can tell you too, that first summer required us to completely reevaluate our response because we are typically responding in the fall and winter, during the cold months, right? All of our PPE is built around that. 100 degrees in full PPE is a very different experience. We were having to bring 2 teams out to a farm and rotate every 10 minutes to get people out of PPE because we were overheating that quickly. It was a very rough summer. What we've seen since then is we've settled back into that normal fall and winter timeline. Go ahead and go to the next slide. I'll try and get through these next couple. And then the cows happened this year. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So in February, a mysterious syndrome appeared in Texas. And for those who've been on the board for a little while, I know I spoke this fall a little bit in Wilsonville about this. But so we saw this emerge in Texas. The symptoms were fairly minimal at that point. What we've since learned is they were really kind of minimized. They really were seeing a lot of the same symptoms at the same level we're seeing now. It just was kind of a taboo topic at that point because there was a lot of fear about, well, if this really is influenza, we kill the chickens when they get sick. No one wanted to make a big deal about the cows. We don't kill the cows, don't worry, spoiler alert. We don't kill the cows, but there was a lot of concern about that. And so there was also a lot of concern about trade, and both within the country and internationally. So in late March, USDA determined that it was the same H5N1. It's a separate subclade. You'll see B3.13, that's the subclade that is infecting cattle. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Carla. So since then, this is what that outbreak map looks like. You'll notice we are still white. We have not had a case of this virus in Oregon. We've done a lot of surveillance to date. California is not so lucky. The highest color pattern, which California is the only state at the highest color pattern, starts at 75. As of this morning, they've got 650 cases. Individual dairy farms in California have been infected. 150 of those came last week. So it is really exploding in California right now. A lot of that has to do just with the way that their dairies operate, that there's a lot of dairies that are large dairies that kind of specialize just in milking the lactating cattle. When they dry those cows off, they go to a dry cow feedlot that specializes in just handling dry cows. When the calves are born, they go to a calf ranch that specializes just in calves. Then when those are weaned, they go to a calf raiser feedlot, and then they go to a heifer raiser. At each of these points, you get intermixing from different farms. And so they're seeing a lot of transmission. Those dry cow lots are probably the biggest transmission source right now. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Carla. So the other fear about this is we know this is a zoonotic virus. There was a lot of fear early on because this is also a select agent. It's a known bioterrorism agent, which means you can't study it without special permission. And the Homeland Security really frowns on studying how to infect animals that aren't supposed to get infected with a select agent. So it took like 2 months before they could even start researching this because they had to get congressional approval. What they found is pasteurization inactivates this virus in milk. Even the sub-pasteurization that a lot of the dairy products use, basically every method that's out there inactivates this virus. Cooking in ground meat also inactivates this virus. The only cooking process that did not fully inactivate this was ground hamburger cooked to 120 degrees, which is 10 degrees below rare. Please don't eat your hamburgers cooked to 120 degrees. There's a lot of other reasons you should not be eating raw hamburger.
I second that.
So, but any of that at 135 at rare, this virus is inactivated. At medium, it's completely gone. So this is not a food safety concern, except for with raw products, which is a whole nother story, and we're starting to see that. Go ahead and go to the next slide. I think I'm just about done. So the other thing we've started seeing, and this is outdated already, and I just put these numbers up last Friday, but we've been seeing human cases. We've been seeing spillover of this virus. At this point, almost every case has been associated directly with occupational exposure. Again, these numbers were from last Friday. There's a few more people now, but of the 58 human cases last Friday, 35 of them had been exposed to infected cattle working on a dairy farm. 21 had been exposed to infected poultry on commercial poultry operations that were infected. There's 2 unknown exposure. At least one of those, they do suspect raw milk consumption. There's been a few more. The state of Louisiana just announced the first serious or severe case yesterday. that is believed to be a backyard poultry exposure as well. Oregon has had one of these cases. We've diagnosed actually a couple of additional ones that were exposed in Washington and came down to Oregon, got sick in Oregon after that exposure. But part of that is because of our really robust One Health approach. When we go out to these farms, we take public health with us, as well as a couple cases of donuts and some coffee. And I'm not kidding about that at all. People are way more receptive to you when you have coffee and donuts. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Right now, the risk to humans is still very low. That's CDC's assessment. That's Oregon Health Authority's assessment. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So we have ongoing surveillance in basically all species. There's a number of programs we've had going on for months, if not years, as passive surveillance with OSU at the Veteran Diagnostic Lab. Any poultry that comes in for testing automatically gets swabbed and tested for influenza. We had our first case detected based on that a week and a half ago. We've been paying for those tests for almost 3 years now, since before this was even a thing. We also test any cat that comes in for rabies testing. After it's negative for rabies, gets tested for influenza. We have, over the summer, we instituted a requirement that all lactating cattle that were going to be exhibited had to be tested, as well as all waterfowl that were going to be exhibited at a fair in Oregon. We paid for all of that testing again. We got a lot of really good surveillance. We have pre-movement testing that happens in dairy cattle. We do a lot of surveillance in poultry. We investigate probably 5 to 6 backyard die-off reports, so we call them sick bird calls, a week of owners of backyard poultry. When if they have a bird that dies, gets sick, when they call us, we investigate every one of those, determine the risk. If it is high risk, we'll send someone out. We collect samples. We get that tested. There's no cost to anyone on any of that. The other thing that we do with this, and we've been doing since the very beginning of this, is we've worked with Oregon Health Authority to put together PPE kits, because those backyard owners, it's 2 or 3 days before they get results back sometimes, and they're continuing to care for their birds. So we've been providing that PPE to them since before it was cool to provide PPE to people. CDC started recommending it this last spring. We've been doing it for 2 years before that. Because of that really close One Health partnership with Oregon Health Authority. We also have commercial scale kits that we have. If we have a commercial farm, we provide that PPE. The first time we show up, we bring a pallet of PPE out so that they have what they need on day one. And that's really the focus of our response in dairy cattle. We are also now beginning to test every dairy in Oregon through the processors, through samples that already exist, that are already in that sampling stream, to be able to ensure that there are no cases. All of the surveillance we've done so far, we have not found any. But it also, once we get through the first round of testing, really the goal is weekly testing. They've shown provides an average of 16-day benefit in detection. You can find it 16 days earlier on average by testing a dairy weekly than you do by waiting till you have clinical signs. It's about a 3-week lag to see clinical signs. That 16-day benefit is before transmission happens. It's before spillovers happen off of the farm to other farms, before spillovers happen from the cattle into the people. And so that gives us that lead time to be able to get PPE there, to be able to work with the producers to provide the support, to provide consultation on biosecurity, to provide the disinfectants, to provide all of that, to be able to stop that case on that farm so that we don't end up in a situation that California is in right now. So I'll end there and go to questions.
So just for clarification, when you're doing the testing of the dairies, what are you testing?
We are testing a milk sample. So there is already a sample. Every time the milk gets picked up out of the dairy's bulk tank, there's a sample collected for components, antibiotics, quality. The processors are running those tests. So they pull a small sample out of that once a week to then send to OSU. It was a method. I think we're the only state doing it quite that way so far. It's been really efficient for the processors. It means the producers don't have to do anything. There's no imposition on the farms, and it allows us to get those samples really quickly and easily from everyone.
Great. This has been absolutely fascinating. Any burning questions? We've run into the time of our comment period, so if there are some burning questions, we could do comment period and then do questions. If not, maybe just hang, because we have actually one person on the line for the public comment period, which is supposed to begin right now. And we will take a break, you guys, but it might be really short. So anyway, Jeff Stone from Oregon Association Nurseries is on the line for his 3-minute public comments. So Jeff, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Madam Chair, Jeff Stone, I serve as the executive.
And Jeff, we're having audio problems here, so speak loudly.
Right, Madam Chair, can you hear me all right?
Kind of. So yeah, just maybe just a little more volume and we're cool.
Yes, ma'am. Is that better? Okay. I'm not a pleasant thing to look at, so this will work out. So, Madam Chair, Jeff Stone, Oregon Association of Nurseries. I serve as the executive director. First of all, I want to thank the board for all your commitment. Certainly, putting up with Josh Selinsky, I know was a hardship, but it's quite all right. I just wanted to have just a couple minutes to give you a sense of a few things that I'm thinking about that's pertinent to your meeting. First of all, I want to thank you for your consideration of the resolution on ag overtime. I listened to the panel yesterday with great interest. I thought that the board was balanced in their questioning and understanding of the pertinent issues that are very relevant to ag. I also want to let you know and give you some solace that the agricultural executives for all the major sectors are in alignment and unified on ag overtime. So that's a very good thing. We've really tried hard to find a balance between someone like the nursery industry, which has a very long peak season, versus one that has a very short acute peak season, to try to develop a pathway forward. I also want to let you know that OSU's economic study is almost final, and I anticipate that it will show that what's happening in California and Washington in terms of people's actual pay, their hours are going to be cut. But I want to make sure that we give OSU every opportunity to finalize their study. I asked them for the truth, not what I wanted to hear. And we will have an ag overtime bill in the next legislative session that will be pre-session filed that has uniform support of the agricultural industry. So I just wanted to thank you for the attention and the resolution, as particularly to you, Madam Chair, and to my good friend Josh Selinsky for putting this in front of the board. Just a couple other quick things. We have Senate Bill 576, which is the $2 million for Japanese beetle. It was submitted by Democratic Senator Lou Frederick. And so I'm very encouraged, and we're going to push that. I want to really let you know that I appreciate the hard work of Director Hansen and also the ODA team to try to help us work through that issue. Secondarily, we have a water transfer fix with the groundwater rules. It's going to be really hard for anybody to be able to get additional water, so we have a fix that's going to be going in there. And then, of course, it's not quite our free bird, but it's soon to be. We have a cat green good exemption bill that we're going to put at least into play. I don't hold a lot of confidence that will pass this session, but it is a conversation worth having. And then lastly, just to think, I don't want you to think I'm getting lazy on you. We have a immigration visa bill that U.S. Senator Ron Wyden will be introducing on our behalf and behalf of the nursery industry nationwide. And I just wanted to let you know that those are all things that I'm happy to continue to engage with you. So thank you for my 3 minutes in front of this illustrious group.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Much appreciated. All right. Are there any questions of our panel? And if, it's okay, obviously, to chat with them and ask the questions during break, but let's go ahead and do a break. And let's give us, I think we can afford 10 minutes, but sharp back here at 10:30. Thank you. 1:30. Everybody.
No, I'm curious because I'm still trying to process everything.
Oh, me too.
All right, what are we?
Pearl, are we? All right, thanks, everybody. And again, really do appreciate the panel earlier. If there were questions, hopefully you got them answered during the break. But if anybody does want to do that now, we can. Okay. Well, let's move into our board board business.
Review of 25 resolutions.
Oh, yeah. I guess, yes, the overview, in part, it's board business, but I think we're moving into a process which we started last year of trying to review what we're looking at for resolutions for the following year in advance of the following year, so we could kind of get a flavor of that. One of the changes we've looked at making, instead of splitting everything up into work groups, is to be able to have these discussions as a committee of the whole. And so by actually making some determinations early on what the resolutions we may want to look at, we might also be able to expedite the discussions, that we're not just having discussions for discussion's sake, but ensuring a couple things. One, we have new board members, so having these resolutions come forward are a good thing. And Eric, you had commented on that earlier, and I think that's a very positive piece. I think the second thing is, hey, if we're fine with those in advance, we don't have to belabor the point when we take a look at those. And so by having this kind of discussion in advance can help us, but we'll do that in March. So these will be out and be provided that the public knows we're going to be looking at them. And then we'll just be able to kind of decide on what we're going to focus on when we get on the March board meeting. But again, we're going to be doing this as a whole group, not just as work groups then reporting in, as a test to see how this works going forward. So I'd like to invite Jonathan, Isaac, and Casey forward, please, to review what's proposed for the 2025.
I was going to take my microphone on the road there for a second. All right, good morning, Chair Miller, Director Sharpelo-Hanson, members of the board, Jonathan Sandow. So I think it's underneath in the most recent board book, tab 13 here, is kind of an outline of the 9 resolutions that kind of are up for their 3-year review in 2025. What we did was try to go through and just do maybe like a quick level look at the resolutions themselves, and then kind of put forward the recommendations either to make changes or not to make changes. Where we suggested to make changes, we just this is not like recommended changes. I think they were just trying to highlight areas that okay, that way in March, and in March when we come back to it, we have a little bit of oh yeah, these are kind of the areas we were thinking about looking at, and just trying to do a bit more setup. I realize that some of them are not they're not exactly saying, these parts need to be changed. It's more contextual than anything. And so that's kind of where we're at. But I think out of the 9, we had 6 of them that we've kind of recommended to at least look and review at, and then 3 of them that we felt kind of could kind of go unchanged. And so kind of going in order here, I think I'll just kind of tick through them, but then after each one, as we go through, if we have questions, then, just jump in, and that way we don't, once we kind of move on to the next one, we're done, and we'll just kind of move through that order, if that's all right, folks. Resolution 107, priority for agriculture use of water. We recommend this to be reviewed in 2025. Really to help kind of, I think, put in some references to to a lot of the recent drought conditions, kind of looking forward to the 2025 session in terms of, really looking at, I think this would be a good conversation, in March too, to have around this resolution, and looking at kind of, when you're modernizing, kind of how, how the use of water is moved and kind of prioritized. And so looking at that one, and bringing just maybe some more kind of maybe some like modern language into it would be helpful. So I don't know if Isaac wants to. I'll pause and let Isaac and Casey jump in where appropriate, or board members.
Yeah, Jonathan, I don't really have anything to add. I mean, other than, further emphasizing the work that we're likely to see through the 25 sessions. So it's a good opportunity to engage in this conversation, like you said, at the next board meeting, and maybe lean into some more conversations around water allocation and beneficial uses. So.
And I'll add here too, just from Mike, from a process standpoint, the idea, now that we're doing this, I just thought about this, and Carla, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the fact that we have these recommendations from you that we're going to look at this, so that has been available for the public to take a look at, and anticipating up to March. So I'd certainly encourage anyone who, from an external standpoint, that's looking at these resolutions, to provide us comments early. I think that's perfectly appropriate in advance of our March board meeting, of any kind of changes or ideas that we might want to be able to consider. And that might help us be more efficient in the process as we go forward. And then certainly then any changes are proposed for then additional comment till you look at finalization at the end. So unless Jonathan, I hadn't, does that sound okay?
Yes, that's the plan, in that this packet has been posted with this December meeting's materials, and we will also request public comment on these resolutions before the March meeting. So we'll have those in advance of the March meeting.
Great. Cool. Thank you.
And so then moving along, Resolution 281, Conservation Plan for the Oregon Coast Coho. This was last updated in 2022. To the best of all of our recollections, there hasn't been any updates to the Coho Conservation Plan, and so this resolution would stand as is. Resolution 301, Minimizing Conflicts and Coexistence in Agriculture. Again, updated in 2022, and we had gone from 2011 to 22 on this resolution. There was the members at the time did add a lot of changes to it, and looking at it, we didn't see any kind of any big ones to flag for folks to recommend as change. So we're recommending to stand as is. Resolution 307, farm worker housing. I think I flagged this one as to review in 2025, and I think that's kind of coupling onto the conversation yesterday. We heard the ag housing referenced a number of times in the overtime conversation. OSHA is currently under rulemaking right now with it, and so kind of after all of that is done, it felt appropriate to review this in 2025 to make sure that, if for nothing else, that the resolution, is still current, especially with any action that OSHA, is anticipating to take next year. So maybe changes, maybe not, but it didn't feel right just to say, leave this one stand as is, knowing that there are probably significant changes coming. And Resolution 309, Coordinated Streamside Management Approach for Water Quality. We flagged this to review. I think really just to try to talk more currently about our SIAs, and kind of how we coordinate with other state agencies, and kind of just putting in some, I guess, some more clarifying language, and being able to make it more applicable to the work that we're doing currently in the water quality program.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, like the term coordinated streamside management approach isn't a current terminology that's used within the Ag Water Quality Program or across with our partner agencies. It's a little bit dated and would benefit from some just general updating. I think the main focus of the resolution is still appropriate and applicable, but just some of the terminology can be improved and clarified.
And then resolution 313, I'd say 309 and 313 are very complementary. 313 talks about what SIAs are and kind of how we work with the SWCDs on that. And then the other one is really kind of how we do that coordinated approach. So recommendation was no changes in 313 and like a lot of the work would be done in 309. And then resolution 317, I'll say that I was trying to add some context here, and Casey's initial comment was we just need to rewrite the whole resolution because it's just a little bit out of date. I think that is also evident in some of the information and narrative I put in there because I was drawing from some of the context and materials that I was finding, which are also out of date. And so I think that part of this is really just almost a whole rewrite of this resolution, and as we go through. So don't even I think even some of the language here is using as a guidance is not even great guidance because it's even out of date.
For the Casey Prentice, for the record, we also have the funding sources changed, been reduced quite a lot, and it appears like it'll take another big reduction in the first part of the year. So we will need to rewrite this and then have a pretty good discussion about it when we're done.
Great. Thank you.
Resolution 318, siting of energy transmission generations facilities. I will, in full transparency and be fully admitting, I flagged this one for review because I don't know enough about it to have just said not to review it in 2025, especially with kind of the solar siting conversations that have been happening at DLCD. And so we marked this one to kind of review as in 2025 just to make sure that it was current and currently aligned with the work that has been going on in this space since 2020, August of 22 last time it was reviewed.
So as a note, it might even make a lot of sense if there is any public comment early on to see if it should motivate us to change or not change. Oh, we've got some comments. Okay, hold on. Okay, Barbara, Stacy.
Stacy Simonich, for the record. I would just say that a panel might be good on this one too.
That was my comment too.
Ah, okay, great. Okay, your comment too? Okay.
Yeah, and I'd wait until after the RAC completes their work at DLCD. They've asked for a continuation, so probably won't really see anything until March from that RAC.
So would our March board meeting be too soon?
Maybe.
Why don't you guys take that into consideration to see if that makes sense to maybe look at a panel?
Where is it?
It's the.
Where is it? It's Burns, isn't it?
No, this is in Salem.
Should be in Salem.
Salem, I think it's the 17th.
And we typically have like a lot of, the folks come doing legislative prior. It's usually a pretty full meeting
agenda
to begin with. And so.
Yeah.
More sense to have it
at the following meeting.
Coordinated in an area where it's a bigger deal.
Yeah.
There's certainly areas where it's like.
We'll be in Burns at the next meeting.
Yeah, somewhere out there.
Yeah, well, we are in Burns.
No. So March will be in the Salem area,
No,
right?
but it's the following one.
LeGrand.
Oh, LeGrand.
That would be a good one.
LeGrand would be good. Okay, great. Okay, so that, if we could flag that for a panel, thank you guys, for a panel in, when we meet in LeGrand. Great, okay. All right.
Okay, we're also trying to coordinate theming of these. And then resolution 319, climate change policy considerations. I think in 2022, this was kind of reviewed and moved with not a significant amount of changes. Looking at it, it's pretty quiet on kind of natural disaster impacts. It's pretty quiet on a lot of things that I think we have a state and industries have experienced in the last 4 years or so. And so I flagged this one to review to really, I think, add in some of those, the linkages to more natural disaster kind of pieces within the climate change policy review, and kind of cross-referencing with water management and voluntary programs that we've seen, since in the last few years, the climate smart programs coming out of USDA and those types of things. So I don't know, I don't think this is a full rewrite. It's more just trying to include some of the more recent programs and changes and impacts that we've seen.
Okay, so if I've got this right, in summary, we would be looking at potential reviews and changes with everything except, but then, asterisk this if we get comments, no changes to 281 conservation plan for Oregon Coast Coho, minimizing conflicts with coexistence in agriculture, no changes. And 313, water quality strategic implementation areas, because we're making the big changes in the stream side management, which the name needs to change, in that previous 309. So those three we would be up for, and we anticipate that we'll be doing that panel for that the solar later on. So does that make sense to everybody? But again, if we get some comments earlier, that's really, really helpful, I think, for us to be able to make determinations in March of what we need to spend time working on. Open up to questions, comments.
Just want to thank you guys for taking the time to do this, because being a board member for the past 4 years, I've really thought this would help.
I ditto that. This is awesome to set us up for success in 2025. Thank you.
Gives us a chance to do something else too.
Yeah, I think more meaningful focus on high priority policy discussions. And again, committee of the whole, we'll see how that works. But the divide up was, I think, awkward. I think it was also awkward for folks in the public, how we were doing that. And so I think this will allow more transparency on a resolution process too. So great. Super. Lisa, do you have anything to add? Okay. You guys, thank you for that, but we'll move now into look at the 2024 resolutions that are still not yet finalized. And let me get to my notes here. So we've got, okay. So for, actually, before we move into that, let's do the OWEB report, and then we'll go in, if that's okay with you, and then we'll go into the resolutions. I messed you up, I'm sorry.
I was getting myself all organized. So Barbara Boyer giving the OWEB report. We had our meeting in Coos Bay in October, and we did a lot of work. Let's see, where am I? Sorry, you guys. We had our strategic plan update. We had a tribal, we had a new stand-up program under the tribal project development grant. So we were asked to add $1 million in a line item onto our budget. We chose an OAHP member like we all just did this time. We also had to approve new spending of $5 million for drinking water source protection program into our 2023-2025 budget. We initiated some rulemaking, and then we were also asked to approve $2 million in funding for immediate fire response technical assistance programs. So there was a lot of money approval in that particular meeting. And in one of our
our discussions, actually the governor's recommended budget is looking very good for OEB. And one of the really interesting conversations we had is that we're being asked, we, OEB, are being asked to do stand-up programs for one time. And it's temporary funding. And there's like developing a whole new program for temporary funding. So we're really looking into that as a board of, like OAHP. It's just, you never know year to year if you're going to get the funding. The drinking water protection program is just one time, but you're asked to make this whole program around it. So there's a lot of effort at this, the staff level standing up these programs. And we're kind of, noodling around how we can word that to hopefully make them more permanent programs. So that is all I have. Thank you.
Questions?
Miguel Lopez for the record. Barbara, what kind of one-time programs are you guys looking at?
Well, the legislators are asking us, they're giving us money to stand up like the drinking water protection program, the wildfire response, Oregon Ag Heritage Program. These are going to keep happening. So these are natural disasters that, if like wildfires, they're not going away, but they're only giving us one-time funding. So if we could get a consistent pot of money for that, it would be helpful.
I have a quick question. Is the clean drinking water, or Eric Orm for the record, is it clean drinking water for the La Guama situation, or is it for something else?
That's totally separate.
May I add? Lisa Sharp-Lanson for the record. So it's source water protection for drinking water systems is what the grant at OEB is for. I think the challenge, just taking back a step in my history with these stand-up programs, OEB has extensive processes in terms of how they do their grant programs and typically needs to adopt administrative rules for each of those. And so it's the process part of it that's so hard for them and the staffing need to be able to put those together. And so, I think we were talking about time and space. Is there a different way potentially even to do it if you don't have ongoing funding? But fire, I think, was one of the areas that there were discussions around. We're going to continue to see wildfires, we believe. And so what do we as a state need to be doing to help support those communities?
It's a great conversation. I'm really glad we started it at the last meeting. So it'll continue rolling forward. But the whole board is supportive of figuring out a resolution.
Excellent. That's great. Any other questions of Director Boyer? Okay. In light of the fact that there are folks that may want to be beaming in at 11:15 virtually for the discussion of our resolutions, instead of going into those, we'll move up the industry report update to now. And if we don't go into 11:15, we may take a little bit of a break, because I actually think all the resolutions probably just to have that publicly noted for the record if people were looking at being part of that at 11:15. Industry report update.
So in your packet this morning, I handed out, it's under your tab 14, or I handed it to you on your desk.
Okay.
This is the latest draft that we have worked on from our discussions over the past year about doing our industry report. We have drafted some language under the key issues, which we talked about at our last meeting. So again, this is just a draft. The layout and, graphic design is not final, but it gives you the language that we're speaking about. And then we will be circulating this out. In addition, I'll be sending out an email to you, because I think at the last meeting we decided on who would take the lead on reviewing a couple of the different key issue sections. And so we'll work specifically with you on updating this language.
Great. So with kind of in process with a board member. How do we do the new board member versus former board member in a 2024 report? Is it who had served through? Because I saw Luis and Brian still there, but that might send, are we flagging that? And maybe I didn't look at it closely enough. Are we flagging that differently or?
Thank you for the question. We had not flagged it differently, time and space, when we were working on this. We know that we'll have a new board member has been appointed.
Right.
And so we need to think about how we incorporate that. So something for us to consider, I think. So
Okay.
thanks for the question. I think one thing that would really help us, as staff worked on this, the first couple pages are great infographics with just basic information around Oregon agriculture that comes from the 2022 census. But as we picked the key issues, we talked about and tried to come up with like key take-home messages from the narratives, and making sure that what we've captured from an agency perspective aligns with what you all see from your board perspective for those key take-home messages would be really helpful for us. And then if the narrative that we've drafted is on track, thinking about a process for it to go either into your voice, if each of you want to take a section. We need to do it in a pretty quick turnaround because session is around the corner. Or if you want us to go back with and do additional drafting with your input. I think those are a couple of key things for me because as we worked through it, I thought about it, I'm like, okay, we need key messages that we want to send with each of these sections. Because we tried to move away from a completely narrative report previously. Early days of the reports, they were like a book. Then we moved away and tried to do it in a simpler, more trifold. I think this is like something in between. And so input and help around those would be much appreciated.
Yeah. And if we refer back to the minutes, and Carla, thank you for including those in our packet again, is we talked about lead people on the board for each of these topics. So let me repeat those so everybody recalls what we all signed up for at the last meeting. For water, it would be Ty and Ellie. Ag workforce, Josh and Ellie. Fire and smoke impacts, Elin and Eric. Market accessibility and trade, Ty and Ellie. Land use, Barbara, Ty, and Chad. So that's what we had talked about as far as the kind of signing up subsets. And if, and I'm trying to think if we missed anybody here that we should flag too. But certainly I think all board members, if you have some comments, but if we could concentrate our focus on those, and again, it's the last pair on page 9 of the minutes. If you didn't take that down quickly when I was reading through it, I think that would be helpful. So let's talk about a minute, talk about how we should go through that.
We also added a couple of sections.
Okay.
From a staff perspective that had come up. So animal health, the avian influenza, so we could think about how we title that, but the emerging diseases issue that we're dealing with.
Okay.
And how that might impact. I think there is a section that touches on some of the changes in the ag statistics in the last census around agriculture and what that looks like in the makeup of Oregon agriculture and what's happening. Staff plugged that in as well. And then economic investments in agriculture. We've talked a lot about, or we're talking more about resilience. I think that's a better way to put it. Talking more about resilience and ag infrastructure for processing, et cetera, and where Oregon is seeing challenges in terms of finding opportunities for that raw product. And cropping is the other thing I hear lately. It's like, I don't know what to grow because I can't find a contract. I don't know what to grow because the market is down on those commodities that are open market. So that was an added section that we threw in for you guys to consider, as well as transportation and infrastructure for farm access. Did I hit all of those, Jonathan? I need to look and make sure Yeah, those were our additives as we started thinking about this kind of more holistically about some of those issues.
Well, I'm wondering if it would be better if we because we just got this draft, and so we haven't had a chance really to look at it. And so maybe what we can do is go down through, we did those assignments before when we were contemplating potential areas. So maybe what we could do is, again, to just expedite, not to preclude any board member from providing comments on any of the sections, but if we're looking at water and climate resilience, maybe we could just go through each one and say who might want to sign up for that. And I think the water before, as I had mentioned, was Ty and Ellie for water. And if anybody else, but now we're also adding climate resilience. So
I think looking at the messages too. Did we capture the right messages for where we're at?
Okay, if we want to spend time with that now, that's great. So, okay. All right. And
Madam
then
Chair.
let's assign who's going to follow up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe we should just read through all of these and then circle back to assignments after we read through all of them, or is that
Okay.
that take
Actually,
too
if we have some time, so let's do. Maybe we can get it done here. That's a good point. All right. So, water and climate resilience, and just to make it simpler, again, we've seen this for the first time, so we're just kind of right now responding, but the message to convey, to concentrate on that, is water security and climate resilience are essential for sustaining Oregon agriculture and rural communities it supports. Ongoing investments prepare producers for challenges for tomorrow. That's pretty general.
Good. The more general, the better.
Okay. Any different comments on that? And then maybe since we're focused on it right now, if we do want, Ty, do you want to be involved in this one? And Ellie, since you were water before? Okay. Anybody else? Ellie, are you going to want to?
Yes, please. Thank you.
I think she's on. We'll put Ty and Ellie down for this. And anybody else want to volunteer? Because I guess in the past, even board members have helped author some of these sections. So we're talking, that's why I'm assigning. I'm sorry, guys. Yeah. So then the second one on labor, message to convey. Addressing workforce challenges is essential for maintaining Oregon's agriculture strength and supporting rural economies. Investments in workforce and solutions benefit both producers and local communities. Comments?
I like the message. The previous part could be overemphasizing some things, but that's my perspective, and missing some things as well.
Okay, as in the preamble.
Yes.
Okay, so the folks that had, it was Josh, you, and Ellie had noted for that, and I'd be happy to be involved in that too. Anybody else want to be involved in that? Okay.
Madam Chair, Miguel Lopez for the record, I would too.
Miguel, okay. Well, maybe let Miguel, and then, so not too many, I can be off of that. Okay. All right. Any other comments on that? And do you want to be specific, Josh, on your, yeah, why not? Again, we're just seeing this, kind of reading it for the first time, guys.
But there's not a lot of farm worker housing in Oregon, in my opinion, and we always talk about it and put this, this bill in there like it's really helping us. It's really helping a small number of farms in Oregon. This isn't California, this isn't Washington, things are pretty different here. And then the other thing that I would be personally really interested in is how many crops are actually being harvested by migrant workforces. We always throw that word out there too, and to me it's outdated. I mean, or it applies to some of ag, but it's not very much.
Okay.
Comes with a lot of connotations. Both of them do.
Yeah.
It's
Somebody
my
ask a
areas
question.
and other areas of
Yeah.
the state, and I understand that.
So, I think a question I would ask then of the board, what is better language? Is it agricultural labor? Is it hand harvested crops? Is it, what words should we be using that don't have the same connotations, but will, display the message that we want to talk about in this?
Skilled, seasonal, better than migrant.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Miguel Lopez for the record. Director Zaleski has a good point there with the verbiage. I would say community instead of migrant, because they have integrated for the most part into our communities as well. That aspect of it is true. The migrant workforce that we do have comes and goes, but it comes and goes from other sectors as well. So by modern day migrant, I think, if I understand this correctly, and this again is my opinion, when we talk about migrant now, we're talking about them seasonally changing jobs. So they might live in the community, but they're seasonally chasing different crops within the region. They will drive to one location to pick one particular agricultural product, and then they will drive to another location to work on another one. So I think that's the new modern day version of what we are seeing. So again, I stress, in my opinion, that's what I think we are seeing.
Thanks.
They're paying rent, they're owning houses, they're like not all migrants living in camps. Farm worker housing is better than camps, but it's pretty much the same thing, if I'm reading it.
And even if we could quantify, I know for some of the, some commodities, the housing is absolutely critical, and the timing is absolutely critical, but you're right, it's not everywhere. And so I think, again, being able to provide that, but I think having this emphasis, again, sorry guys, reading this for the first time, just talking about the, Ag Workforce Housing Grant of 2001, is that as relevant as some of the other things maybe we were talking about before?
So this is helpful, and remember, I'll just say this, we drafted it, and, it came from what was in our visual plate from a department perspective, and so you all, this is your report. So if these are not the right key issues, if we have not captured the right perspective for the key issue, this is your chance to take hold and help convey that message to policy leaders.
Okay.
I mean, I realize that it's critical in Hood River and it's a thing, but to put it in two paragraphs about the whole labor issue, it's I don't know if it's
maybe too much emphasis. Okay.
No, that's great.
Great. So
feedback.
So super. So again, we got to, roll up our sleeves here. So Josh, Ellie, and Miguel on that one. And then we maybe want to think about how we do that from a process standpoint in the future and get us some direction. So avian influenza and animal health, preamble to, we'll need to fully be looked at, but protecting animal health is essential to stability of Oregon's food systems and rural communities. Proactive and coordinated efforts ensure the industry remains resilient and trusted. Something I heard today and something I have heard over time, Oregon's a leader on this, at least from what I was hearing, that we have been dealing with this issue I think very well, and maybe I'm overstating it. I don't mind us tooting our horn to talk about that. So, and again, not saying this for the first time, maybe we do in those first two paragraphs, but I would really like to say, the One Health thing is unique. I mean, I just see, let the legislature know that we're doing a good job on this. So, not to throw anybody under the bus, but to, again, just tout what we're doing. So nobody signed, because we didn't have this as a priority. So who would like to assist on this? Thank you, Chad. Anybody else? Eric, would you? Okay, thank you. Eric and Chad, thank you.
I was going to the same two things. I felt that from Ryan's presentation that Oregon has been a leader and stood out above some of our neighboring states. And then also that One Health emphasis, I think, is another way I think we're being a leader in our approach on disease and animal health.
Great.
So I have one comment on this.
Sure.
Barbara Boyer, in the message, I also feel like we're doing a really good job on educating. So I'd almost like the word educating in the message also. Just hearing the presentation today, there's just a lot that Ryan's doing a great job doing all those webinars, instant on the fly. So ODA is doing a great job at educating too.
I would say thank you. And thank you, Ryan. This is an area, though, that I feel really strongly as a state we need to do more. Because it's not just commercial agriculture that's impacted by this. It's, the backyard, it's the small farm. It talks about, think about it in terms of the diversity in Oregon agriculture right now, in terms of our farms and our farm sizes, et cetera. And it goes to the general public in terms of consumers. It goes to the general public that has pets, et cetera, and the potential to move it back and forth. And I continue to be concerned about that educational component as well as the multi-species risk on small farms that have multiple species and how they handle and use biosecurity. So thank you, I would say, and this is an area that I think for the agency, for Oregon Health Authority, for OSU, that if we could figure out how to come together around it to amplify the message and get it out in a different way, it would be incredibly beneficial.
It's not scary.
That's not scary, yeah.
And I think the uniqueness of how we've approached this allows for showing that because we're approaching it in a very holistic way, we need to do more. So I think that is an and. That's a good catch. Josh?
I just had one comment. Like, I know we only have we're trying to keep it concise, but I think it would be kind of cool to incorporate who our state rep or our state vet is, and the people who are in the department that are, leading their teams, so that their names are somewhere in history, and also if anybody ever wanted to contact them, they could somehow find them.
Okay, great. Okay, all right. Next is economic investments in agriculture, and I'm trying to tie this into what folks had signed up for before.
You missed number 4, ag census.
Oh, sorry, Ag Census, sorry. Number 4, Ag Census. The Ag Census provides critical data to shape the future of Oregon agriculture, supporting producers, sustains both local communities and broader agricultural economy. And this, too, wasn't exactly captured when we all had signed up, these next two. So, I guess, why is that important? I mean, yeah, I know it's important, yeah, but
So I think one of the things that I have been talking about in some of my speeches and talking about in the agency, the recent ag statistics are fascinating to me. 90% of our farms in Oregon are 500 acres or less. They contribute about 1/3 of the agricultural economy, but they're incredibly, incredibly important to those local communities, and they're the backbone of local communities. That other 10% are 500 acres or more. They are, the economic engine that drives our international markets and other things across the state. And so we've always talked about the diversity of Oregon agriculture, but I think this last census and just time and space with some of the issues that we're dealing with and coexistence, et cetera, it's been one that's really hit me. How do you talk about agriculture holistically with this diversity of cropping, diversity of farm size, the importance to our rural communities and the economic engine. Agriculture is good for the economy, agriculture is good for people, and agriculture is important and good for the environment from that climate mitigation perspective. And so just trying to think about capturing some of that, I think that was the intent in grabbing.
Okay.
This is Carla, just for a quick comment. We could also maybe incorporate some of that into the executive summary. So if people are just, going to take a glance at it, right? I mean, might do double duty, but we could also incorporate some of that into the executive summary.
And Lisa, could you repeat too, just because I was writing it down, the 90% of our farms are less than 500 acres and constitute what percent?
No, 500. 90%, it's about, so use it as around about 90% are 500 acres or less. Their economic impact, it's about 1/3.
A third, 30%.
Yeah, 30%.
Okay.
And I'm looking at Sunny because she worked on this for me. It was one of the things I was trying to figure out how to capture and talk about it in a way that it would resonate with people. 10% of the farms are 500 acres or more, but they're 2/3.
70% of that's a huge message that should be right up front. Again, as we look at priorities, as we look at how we focus on things and look at the challenges we face, everything. Yeah.
But think about it. I mean, those smaller operations, they're really important in our communities around the state.
And saying that at the same time.
Yeah. Yep, at the same time, especially in local food systems.
Yeah.
So is it, either I would recommend saying that in the intro executive summary and not in here, or relabel this one from USDA 2024 egg census to something that's more descriptive of what
the importance of or the demographics.
Diversity of Oregon, agriculture, outside of commodities. I don't know how to best say that. But.
Okay. I think there's been some good comments on that. Who would like to help volunteer for this section? Stacy, do you have?
Well, I debate my role in these, right?
Okay. All right, Miguel. Right. Okay, Barbara. Excellent. Thank you. All right.
I would say maybe, or recommend maybe something about, I know it's going to be talking about demographics a little bit, but the loss of farm ground. Because I think it fits right in with these, with your 70-30 and.
Loss of number of farms, acres of, Okay. All right.
Unless it's, more about land use, right? And the issues around, all of it around land use, the issues that we're working on.
Because actually, unless I'm missing something, we don't have land use as one of them.
Well, it's mentioned in this one, so I.
Yeah, so it'd be part of it.
I think
Okay.
the topic has the
All right.
heading got changed.
Okay.
But
All
I
right.
think we can change the heading.
Yes, you can change this.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Moving on. Economic investments in agriculture. Message: investments in processing specialty crops and food, local food systems build resilient strength in rural communities, ensure Oregon agriculture remains competitive.
And it's possible you could tie the two of these together because they have a similar message down deep. Or you can keep them separate and, double down. It's your choice.
I think it's fine.
You think to get
I think they're fine separate.
Okay.
Certainly, I was trying to, as I walked out of the room and came back, this is recapping what we've done in 2020. We heard from somebody from the census. We have talked about all of these things.
Okay.
I think it's important to.
Great. Okay. So we did have investments in agriculture. The market accessibility and trade is not part. So anybody wanting to volunteer for this in economic investments in agriculture for input? I'll help.
I would like to stay on it, please.
Ty, thank you. Great, okay.
This one is your chance to double down on infrastructure.
Yeah.
And ag infrastructure.
And we heard about the new process.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
We've heard a lot about.
Yeah, okay. All right, wildfires, natural disasters, recovery and preparedness efforts are vital to protecting Oregon agriculture and the communities it sustains. Proactive measures build resilience against future disasters. Okay. I think Eric and I had volunteered before. Are there any comments on how this is positioned?
It's missing all the plant stuff that Chris Brennan and her team has done. We've got like lots of new pests and invasive species, and all that's missing.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Do you want to join us on this since you know about that?
Sure, I'll help you.
Okay, Josh, that's great. Thank you. All right. All right. Transportation infrastructure and farm access. Again, a new one.
I think some of this-
Message, strong transportation infrastructure ensures Oregon producers can compete globally while supporting local economies. Investments in ports and rural access are essential for thriving agricultural sector.
So this gets to some of the challenges with T6 and the importance of that access as well as other rural accesses. And this also goes to your, 10% of the farms, and that being, 66, 2/3 of our agricultural.
I would help on this, but I would also emphasize the dams, and it's just as much part of our infrastructure as not just T6, but the ports and Port of Portland.
Right.
And for economical transportation of crops down
the river
down the river system.
River system.
Including the Snake and the Columbia.
Snake and Columbia. Okay. All right. Anybody else want to help Eric?
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. All right. We've got Chad and Josh. Okay. All right. Okay. All right.
Chair Miller.
Yes.
Ellie said that she's having mic issues, but she'll let us know kind of where she wants to plug in on these. So
Ellie?
I guess she's been trying to respond or talk, but we haven't been able to
hear her. Okay.
We'll follow up with her.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you much.
And so if it helps, I think on our side, we'll have some discussion around the team and put a lead staff person with each of them, depending on where their expertise is, to help you all frame it, and then we can work through it.
And since we're under 3, I mean, again, I want to, if there is a discussion versus just an email exchange, how do you want to handle that to make sure we're doing that correctly?
Okay, I need to look to Carla to help me with the new public meetings rules.
I believe it's okay if we have under a quorum and we can have that conversation, but we may need to call a full board meeting to lay it out in front of everybody, to actually agree on the recommendation, right? Or have that discussion in that you're providing input, but you're not making decisions.
Well, and it makes sense, too, that it all comes together for the full board to take a look at the final product anyway, so I think that makes sense. I just wanted to make sure that we do that with whoever lead staff is the most expedited way to be able to get comments in and all of those pieces to get this thing done. The last thing I'll ask, and then we need to move into next steps because it was starting at 11:15, so we're actually running early and late, but anyway. How can we do that? What, again, is the timing that you want this finalized? So we'll have expectations because we're talking the holiday season is upon us. So
by law, the board has to do a biennial report. It's basically a biennial report of the state of agriculture. In the past, it's been used for the board to take it during the legislative session. I think traditionally, in my 2 previous lives, we met in February and the board would go do some meetings and take the report over. So ideally, if you want this to be useful in that legislative discussion, and again, it's your report, we would want to have something done pretty early legislative session. Yeah. Yeah. And I need to look to Jonathan and staff in the back to make sure I'm on target, kind of thinking about those dates.
So end of January. So that would mean we would want to, whether we attempt to, put on the calendar a special board meeting toward the end of January. That'll give us that target where we
virtual, right?
And it'll be virtual. And so I don't know how, instead of messing with schedules all now, maybe that's something that Carly, you can take up, do a poll, figure it out. So yeah. Eric?
Yes, I would. I think Lisa, Director Hanson, referred to it. If you could put give us an email and put a head of each one of these 6 or however many there is, and we can just send our rough draft to them, and we can kind of compile them before our January meeting.
Well, or before any small groups have to meet too.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's more one-on-one, so we're not in a quorum, and it shouldn't be an issue, I don't believe.
Yeah, that's great. And none of the groups are more than less than a quorum. So, okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. I think good work on this, and we'll have some work to do now and into the month of January. All right. Just to catch anybody up that might be joining us on the phone, we held over updates on our resolutions from 2024, as well as our new resolution. So we had I'll talk about 3 resolutions first, and that would be 169, which is need for documented ag workforce. Secondly is 266, collective bargaining for ag workers and employees. And the third is 316, federal minimum wage parity. These have been discussed throughout the year. There have been minor wording edits made. Those have been out for public comment. We have not received any public comment on those 3. And so I think it's probably proper if we vote on these individually. But I just leading in those 3, and then we are going to have a comment before we get to 314. But my thought would be if I could entertain a motion to approve as proposed and final those 3. So starting with unless you had a comment separate than that. Okay, let's start with 169. Need for documented ag workforce.
Do you need a motion?
Mm-hmm.
Josh Zelensky, I recommend that, or I make a motion to approve the resolution 169 with the minor edits proposed.
Okay, is there a second?
Miguel Lopez, for the record, I second.
It's moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Second, 266, collective bargaining for ag workers and employees. Need a motion.
Madam Chair, Miguel Lopez, for the record, I would like to propose a motion to adopt the recommendations for 266.
All right, is there a second?
Eric Worm, second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Federal minimum wage parity, 316.
I so move.
Okay, is there a second?
Josh Zelensky, second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving 316 as amended signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. I think in part why we had some hesitation, the work group that worked on this, 2 of the members have rotated off the board and they're not here, so we're, who have a lot of background on these, but we've all had a chance to look at these thoroughly. So 314,
want me to speak to that?
Yes, please do.
Okay, thank
Please
you.
do. Thank you.
So there are edits, but there has been one edit that was missed. Under the resolution part, number 1, we had asked to take out first sentence, the second part of the first sentence, take out with the goal of reducing those permitted uses and just swiping that. So that did not make the edits, and so that would be part of the motion is that would be slashed from this.
And we did discuss that in the public meeting last time too, but I think in transition of staff and whatever, it just was missed. So
from with to uses?
So go ahead and...
Number 1, under resolution, so it's page 2, first sentence, the second, or the middle part of the sentence. So what would be removed is with the goal of reducing these permitted uses.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Is that in the form of a motion, Barbara, then?
No.
Okay. All right. With those amendments, does anyone want to make that motion with that amendment, and then we'll move on?
Eric Worm, I'd like to make a motion to approve 314, permitted use of land zoned exclusive farm use and on high-value farmland, with the recommended edits and the addition of the exemption of, with the goal of reducing those permitted uses under number 1 in resolutions.
Okay. So in striking that?
In striking that.
Okay, excellent. All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. Any further?
For the record.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate that. Now we have, at our last board meeting, and we talked about this yesterday as well, we had talked about priorities at our last board meeting, and a group was formed of the board to put together a resolution on ag overtime. And that group was Ellie, Chad, Josh, and myself. And so the ag overtime resolution was available to the public in the board packet. We didn't receive any written comments on it, but certainly we received some verbal comments today and even yesterday in that regard that seemed positive with what we had proposed. So I would like to, Josh, thank you for kind of helping spearhead some of that and getting us all together on it. I'll open it up to see if there are anything you want to say, and then any questions of other people before we put a motion on the table.
Josh Zielinski for the record. No, you've kind of wrapped it up nicely there. We've never created a new resolution, so, I mean, in my time, which is at least the last 4 or 5 years, this isn't necessarily something I'm like super passionate about myself, but this is something we've continued to hear about as we've traveled throughout the state. And I think it's important that as a board, we recognize the things that people continue to tell us. If we notice themes, that we try to address them if they're not being addressed in a resolution already. So, did you need anything else from me?
Well, I think any other comments?
One other thing is we created a draft. This isn't the exact draft that we wrote. The staff at ODA has had a chance to kind of help us refine things, and I wanted to point to that. That's been looked at as well.
Yeah. And I think from a committee, we felt comfortable with what the ODA staff had provided. But any other comments, Chad, from you or... And poor Ellie can. Okay. All right. So I'll entertain a motion to move forward with the approval of the ag overtime resolution.
Madam Chair, Miguel Lopez for the record. I'd like to propose a motion to accept this resolution.
Excellent. Is there a second? I'd second it if I can, but I'm not allowed to, I guess. Okay, Ty.
For the record, a second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yeah, Madam Chair, is it correct that it is 40 hours by 2026, or was it 2027?
It is 2027, you're right.
It is 2027.
That would need to be corrected.
Okay, and I think that since it was a
It was
error,
brought up yesterday,
Yeah.
and I did.
well, and we actually talked about that a minute ago, and then we thought, no, yeah, and we actually thought we were still okay with that language, but yeah, okay, good point. Thank you, Eric. So maybe not absolutely correct parliament procedure. You accept that?
Madam Chair,
Change?
I'd like to propose a resolution and with the accepted change of from 2026 to 2027.
Okay, you'll accept that change, and the second accepts the change, and yes, so 2027 is noted, so great. Good. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Great. Thank you. Okay. All right. I think we are basically at the end of the meeting, and we have our next meeting scheduled for March 12th through 14th in Salem. And again, with that end in mind of January, to have a special meeting in between to finalize the report to the legislature. So thanks, everybody. I have loved this meeting. I really think this has been a very full meeting with substantive discussion. I know it's not always easy to do that, and it was also an area that I learned a lot about the seafood industry in this meeting, which was just absolutely phenomenal, and I know it takes a village to put these meetings together. Any additional comments?
I would encourage everybody to be in Salem in person at the next meeting. It's really important that legislators can put a face to farmers.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that something we need to think about too is, I guess in the past, and because of COVID, go for it, Lisa. You know the history of this meeting. Go for it.
So I would ask this board, pre-COVID, the February meeting in odd long session years, board members would visit with key legislators on key committees. And, asking, is that something this board would like to do? And if it is, then we will work to figure out how to work that into the schedule. It might be, depending on what the agenda looks like, it might extend the length of the meeting by a bit, because it usually takes about a half a day for us to get everything scheduled and you all to be over there.
Well, that would be in lieu of tour time.
And that could be it.
We've already pretty much wrapped up 3 resolutions, so I think we could use that time.
Yeah, I think that is great. And the other thing we want to consider, since we've been having a evening event with local folks, how we do that when it's in Salem, and is it appropriate to invite legislators to or not, or just industry and other stakeholders or whomever?
Definitely invite them. That way they know they might not come, but they know we're here and we care.
That's what I was kind of thinking, but I thought there might be some kind of potential conflict or something if that's not appropriate. So, yeah.
So we'll look at the rules. I think, as I remember back, we have invited, key legislators to dinners. So I think if we were, equitable in what we did, and it's a reception, it's not a full dinner, we don't run into anything in terms of gifts and other things. So let us do some work on that. But what I'm taking from all of you and kind of looking around the room, you would like the opportunity to interact with legislators if possible.
I have a comment on that. Yes. Having done legislative visits during long session, I really question how valuable that is at that late time. Like March is our meeting, not February. I've often thought that we should be doing it off long session. I just don't know what impact we have. I mean, are they listening? They're so busy with what's on the floor, and I always question how valuable it is at that time. I know it's valuable, but I like the thought of inviting them to a reception. But do we make it a little more formal with presentation? I mean, I don't know what it looks like. I personally have always questioned how valuable our time is to them, for them.
I think you're right. I mean, you're definitely just taking like a 5-minute slot, but you might just happen to hit them on the right day, and they're making decisions every hour. The other thing is, as we go around the state, I think it's important that we've had several of them show up to the meetings in their district. That's amazing.
Yesterday.
Yeah, if you can catch them on their home turf, that's sweet. So.
Yeah. Okay, so why don't we leave it that we definitely would like to have invitations as appropriate to the reception. We would like to potentially, even if it's a brief thing, but I think after we do this, Barbara, you make a good point, is are we even better served at looking at doing it on the non-odd years for a little bit more, face time too. It doesn't hurt to do both.
And it's not like we're trying to shape policy. I just think it's important that they know that there's like a board of farmers that's, has some input at the ODA, and, it goes both ways. ODA is kind of, using us as a soundboard or whatever, what's important, what's not.
Okay.
So I just think it's important that they understand, because I don't think all the boards are the same. There's different structures.
You're right.
Okay, I think that works. That's a wrap. Happy holidays, everybody, and get to thinking about your sections of the report to the legislature. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.